and it should stay dry through much of the day, but frequent showers will still move in for western areas of northwestern England, Scotland and some parts of Northern Ireland as well. And we could see gale force winds as well as we head into the afternoon. So a fresh feeling afternoon in the north, a little bit warmer in the south with highs of around 21 degrees.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
£30,000 in tax-free cash really could be yours. It's our biggest cash prize of the year so far, and you could be getting that winning call from us to tell you that you're our next Great British Giveaway winner.
You're joking. Really? Seriously? It's not a line, what is it?
I'm flipping heck. Oh dear.
Oh my God. This is amazing.
I'm in shock. Like I said, I've never won anything like this.
That is absolutely fantastic.
We're over the moon. Thank you.
For a chance to win £30,000 in tax-free cash, text cash to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2. Or post your name and number to GB07 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 30th of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Britain's Newsroom. Weekday mornings from 9:30.
He fell into a coma. His family, of course, absolutely distraught. Because Turkey is outside the European Union, it therefore doesn't count under the Global Health Insurance Card scheme, which means that he is liable for these costs. And the family say that he's being held there for until they pay at least half the £41,000 that is owed.
One of our viewers here saying their premium, because they have health conditions, can be as much as £1,000. But if they're going to go overseas to, as you say, a non-EU country, they still should take it. That's the message here, isn't it? Don't take the risk.
Absolutely. Now, if you do have lots of pre-existing medical conditions, or you're an older person, my lovely mother-in-law is going to be 95 this week. She's still travelling, but only within Europe. And only because the cost of insurance is going to be many times the cost of the trip. And she just thinks, OK, well, I'll get emergency medical treatment free if I'm in the European Union and I've got that GHIC card. But beyond that, absolutely not. It's not worth the risk.
You have to have your card, do you, Simon, to get treatment within the EU? You should just apply for that online.
You should certainly apply for it online. Don't go to any of the scam sites that want to charge you money for it, because it's a free card. But actually, if you haven't, it's absolutely not a huge problem. Yes, you have to go through a bit of rigmarole, or at least your family do, to sort it out. But in general, if you go to a public hospital, they will treat you first and ask questions later in the European Union. And if you're a British resident, you should get it for free. Even if you forgot to get the GHIC card, they will sort it out eventually.
Britain's election channel. GB News, the People's Channel.
A very good afternoon to you and a happy General Election Eve. It's 3 p.m. Welcome to the Martin Daubney Show on GB News. We're broadcasting live from the heart of Westminster all across the UK. On today's show, Sunak's last roll of the dice. With only 16 hours to go until polling stations open, Rishi Sunak is throwing the kitchen sink, and Boris Johnson to chase every last remaining vote. Could a last-minute miracle be on the cards, or is a Keir Starmer supermajority now a certain shoo-in? Next up, Ukraine, too corrupt for NATO. Yes, Ukraine has been declared. It's too corrupt for the alliance, in a major blow to President Zelensky. And with $380 billion of Western aid now sent their way, do we have a right to ask, where is that money going? And a very merry early Christmas from Sadiq Khan, because in yet another U-turn, London Mayor Khan has slapped the electric congestion charge on motorists from Christmas Day. Is this the latest assault on the war on motorists, a taste of what Labour's green plans could mean for you? That's all coming up in your next hour. Welcome to the show. And on this election eve, I come bearing a beautiful gift. Yes, GB News has sat down for a last supper, a last pint, in fact, with Nigel Farage. Earlier on today, Chris Hope, our political editor, sat down with Nigel Farage. That exclusive is going out later on today. I'll give you a sneak peek of that during the show. No holds barred stuff from the leader of Reform on this election eve. Have you made your mind up? Is there anything any politician can say now to make you change your mind? Let me know what your thoughts on this election campaign has been. Has it been a total calamity? Has it switched you off politics altogether? Or are you determined to get out and vote tomorrow to once again make them listen? Let me know your thoughts. gbnews.com/your say. But before all of that, let's kick off, and it's time for your latest news headlines.
From the GB Newsroom at 3:02, your top story this hour. Political parties are making their final pitches to voters ahead of tomorrow's election as Rishi Sunak insists the race isn't over. Sir Keir Starmer says a big Labour majority would be better for the country, giving his party the mandate they need to repair what he called broken Britain.
We are fighting for every vote, and across the country there will be constituencies which will go down to the wire. And therefore we will continue to fight until 10 o'clock tomorrow night, making the case that change only happens if you vote for it. But it is a huge opportunity for our country. This is the opportunity to turn the page and to move forward. And I want people to go out and vote for change and be part of the change that I think will bring about such a different and better future for our country.
Meanwhile, Boris Johnson returned to the campaign trail last night with a warning that a Labour victory means electing Britain's most left-wing government since the war. In his first and final appearance of the election campaign, the former Prime Minister said giving Sir Keir Starmer the keys to number 10 would mean higher taxes. Meanwhile, the Liberal Democrats are telling voters the election is a chance to build a caring nation. The party says they've struck a balance between fun and serious in their campaign and insists its message on health, social care and cleaning up Britain's water is resonating with voters. Reflecting on Boris Johnson's appearance at a Conservative rally last night, Sir Ed Davey said it's time to move on.
It's bizarre that the Conservatives are reminding people of the failures. I think people want to move on from Boris Johnson and Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak and all the damage they've done to our country. And they want to know what you're going to do in the future, how you're going to change our country, particularly how you're going to sort out NHS and care. And that's what Liberal Democrats are talking about. We want to make sure we build a caring nation where the importance of social care and family carers is really at the front, so we can both give them the support they need, but also transform our NHS at the same time by investing in care.
And now to some breaking news. The daughter of Captain Sir Tom Moore has been disqualified from being a charity trustee. The Charity Commission blocked Hannah Ingram Moore and her husband Colin from taking on charitable roles after looking into the Captain Tom Foundation shortly after his death in 2021. It came amid concerns about its management and independence from Captain Tom's family. In other news, the death of the 17-year-old who got into difficulty while swimming in West Sussex has been described as a tragic accident by his college principal. Emergency services were called to a beach in West Wittering near Chichester at around 1 o'clock yesterday afternoon. The boy was part of a group from the Uxbridge College in West London who were visiting the area to celebrate the end of term. The former leader of the DUP will face a trial over allegations of historical sex abuse. The judge at Newry Magistrates Court said this morning that Sir Geoffrey Donaldson and his wife, Lady Eleanor Donaldson, both have a case to answer in connection with the allegations. Sir Geoffrey is accused of 1 charge of rape, 4 of gross indecency and 13 charges of indecent assault between 1985 and 2008. Australian police will resume their search for a 12-year-old child who was reportedly attacked by a crocodile while swimming. The alert was raised last night in Palumpa, a remote town near Darwin in the Northern Territory. Police said the child was last seen swimming in Mango Creek with a group of others before they noticed the child had vanished. Police say their search will continue this evening. And Hurricane Beryl is still swirling towards Jamaica after the powerful Category 4 storm flattened homes across several islands. At least 3 people were killed as the storm inflicted large-scale damage with winds of 145 miles an hour. The ferocious storm comes unusually early in this year's hurricane season, with scientists saying the rapid pace of its approach is partly due to climate change. It's now moving towards Jamaica, where it's expected to batter the shoreline with life-threatening winds and storm surges. And the King and Queen are in Scotland for their annual Holyrood Week. His Majesty joined Queen Camilla at a service in Edinburgh, celebrating the Order of the Thistle at St Giles's Cathedral. The Prince of Wales and the Duke and Duchess of Edinburgh were also in attendance for an extra special service as the Scottish capital celebrates 900 years. Those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Sophia Wensler, more in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you, Sophia. Right, let's get stuck in on this election eve. And the Prime Minister continues to remain optimistic and insist that he is fighting hard for every single vote as the electorate heads to the polling stations in just 15 hours' time. But with every poll pointing towards a Labour landslide, can he really save his job? Well, former Prime Minister Boris Johnson came out fighting for the Tory party at a campaign event last night in a last-minute bid to help Mr Sunak by claiming that Labour will be the most left-wing government since the war. However, not all of his party are as upbeat, including former Home Secretary Suella Braverman, who says it's over for the Tories and they should prepare for the reality of opposition. Well, to discuss this, I'm now joined in the studio by the political correspondent at The Spectator, James Heal. James, welcome to the studio. They've thrown everything at this campaign, the kitchen sink, and now Boris Johnson. Boris was meant to be the silver bullet, but did it misfire?
I certainly think it hasn't had the effect they hoped for. You know, it's not really hit the target. I think, look, you know, Boris Johnson and Rishi Sunak have not really spoken since October 2022. I understand they've exchanged just 2 text messages between the two men ever since then. So I think this was meant to get a sort of feel-good factor back into the campaign by getting the hero of 2019 reunited with the current Prime Minister. And all it's done, really, I think, is serve a reminder to everyone of the tensions between the two and the fact that Rishi Sunak was meant to move on the party from that era. But I think for Boris Johnson, it's really about trying to show he's a team player and be part of it and respond to some of that criticism after he was on photographed in Sardinia on holiday earlier this year.
Some nice floral language. The sledgehammer majority will be the height of insanity, calling Nigel Farage a Kremlin crawler. Don't let the Putinistas deliver the Corbynistas. Very typically Boris with the ruffled hair on top, as you'd imagine. What's happened, I've seen, though, the below-the-line comments on Conservative media outlets, on GB News, on the Mail, on the Express, on the Telegraph. A lot of people are saying, what are you doing back? Now, you had an 80-seat majority. If anybody has blown this, it's you, Boris.
Absolutely, and I think we would remember why Boris Johnson went, which was, it was partly, of course, all the scandals that were involved in him in summer of 2022, but also because he was losing by-elections, you know, Tiverton, Wakefield, by record swings against him. So I think that the old magic has gone to an extent. People still have long memories of COVID and what went on there, and so I think that this is really about kind of rally the true faithful, get them over the finish line, one last hurrah together, but I think it was not going to solve anything, and it's certainly not a silver bullet.
OK, James Hill, I know you've got to dash off. You are a man in demand. Thanks for joining us very much on the show. And let's move on now and speak to another political commentator. And Stephen Carlton Woods joins me now on the show. Stephen, welcome to the show. You may have heard us there. Boris Johnson came into the battle late, as his wont. Doesn't seem to have particularly rallied the troops, certainly not in terms of the electorate. From what I can see, it kind of felt like a bit of a damp squib, and it's maybe even a touch desperate. What's your take?
Well, I was quite surprised, really, that they rolled him out last night to try and rally some last-minute support in the light of all the history between him and Rishi Sunak and the way he was ousted out the party. So I'm quite surprised, really, and I don't think it's going to make much difference to what the outcome may be tomorrow.
Stephen, Sir Keir Starmer even has jumped on this, saying, I'm not worried in the slightest that Boris has come back, having argued for 6 weeks that the Tories are chaotic and divided. To bring out Exhibit A, obviously Boris Johnson, just vindicates the point I've been making. This was meant to be the get-out-of-jail card for weeks and weeks and weeks. Tory activists, big names within the party are saying, bring back Boris, he's a winner. Maybe he was a winner. Do you think, really, Stephen, the varnish is now worn off?
Well, I don't think he's going to have any impact now. If they hadn't have got rid of him, it would have been a different story. And there was lots of reasons for why Boris went. And I've said many times on here, the knives were out for him before he even won that massive victory. There was elements of the party that never wanted him to be leader. There's people that didn't forgive him for Brexit. So there's people within the party that didn't forgive him for not getting the jobs that he may or may not have promised them. So, going over old ground, I'm not so sure really which way it would twist and turn. But, I mean, we are where we're at. I think the Conservatives have got quite a lot of catching up to do. If they can do it by tomorrow, I don't know. I'm not so sure about the polls because we've seen them being drastically wrong. Some polls had Corbyn ahead in the last general election. How wrong could they be? We've seen the media trying to influence how people vote. So I think this has been one of the dirtiest media campaigns in politics I can ever think of, really, in my time. So I think the thing of getting Boris out was a last-ditch attempt. But I think the people voted for Boris. They didn't actually vote for Rishi.
It's interesting, Steve, you talk about polls. The latest, the final People's poll of this election puts the Reform Party on 20 points, Labour 36, the Conservatives trailing on 16. And maybe that's why last night Boris Johnson turned his guns on Nigel Farage. He called in a Kremlin crawler. Don't let the Putinistas deliver the Corbynistas. Yesterday, Steve Baker saying there's no place in the Conservative Party for people like Nigel Farage. Kemi Badenoch saying a vote for reform is a vote for Sir Keir Starmer. Is this negative campaign against Nigel Farage actually damaging Nigel Farage's votes? What do you think it's making them think, well, if you're so determined to suppress that vote, I'm going to go ahead and do it anyway?
Well, I am aware back in October last year, there was elements of the Conservative Party that were talking to Nigel to see if he would actually jump ship and come to, or join the Conservative Party. I think that ship sailed now because he's gone all out really to put the knife back into the Conservatives fair and square, firmly, squarely between the shoulder blades. So I think any bridges that may be able to be crossed are well and truly burnt now. So I don't think we'll ever see Nigel in the Conservative Party. And a prediction I have for you, I can't really see Reform winning any seats.
OK, well, let's see if that comes through. But one thing that came through in a poll this morning, Stephen, a poll by YouGov, is that the biggest motivator for Labour Party voters is to get rid of the Tories. That was 48%, that magic number. The remaining number, 48%, simply want the Tories gone. Only 13% said the country needs a change, a positive vote for the Labour Party. Stephen, how soon do you think it's going to be before reality dawns when, if it looks likely, Sir Keir Starmer gets in? They won't be able to blame the Conservatives anymore when there's no money, when there's still waiting lists are massive, when the small boats are still coming. They will be in charge. They'll be at the helm. They can no longer say, well, the Tories are responsible. You'd have got rid of the Tories. Now, over to you.
Yeah, well, we've seen, how many times have we seen this, Martin? Every time Labour's got in power, they brought the country to its knees financially. Not just last time or the time before, every time they get in power. And people need to really consider, can you really afford a Labour government running the country for another term? And Reform being in the mix is just really helping Labour cement a position. So people need to be very cautious and think clearly. If they voted in a particular way, how's it going to affect their lives? Because their lives do depend on this.
Yeah, but Stephen, you could argue a counterpoint to that. We are £2.7 trillion in debt. We have the highest taxes since World War II. Our borders are completely porous. We have wokery everywhere. We have a Britain that seems to be broken. That's happened under 14 years of Conservative rule. Why would a vote for continuing with that be recommended? You can understand, can you not, why people want change, not just with Reform, but with the Liberal Democrats, with the Green Party, with the SNP. We're seeing a fragmented vote because people are looking at what's been put before them and said, well, that didn't work, so why would I repeat the same thing all over again and expect a difference?
Yeah, the main problem with these other parties, they only focus on a few issues. It's a big job-running government, and there's a lot more to take into consideration. So focusing on all these so-called billionaires or foreign policy and things like that, there's more to running a government than that. And the Conservatives, really, even if they are the best of a bad job, some people may say, is not as bad as what Labour would be expected to do. So, I mean, ask me again in 4 years' time and see where we're up to. I'm sure I'm right.
Well, I wish we had a crystal ball. We don't. Until then, we've got you, Stephen Colton Woods. Thank you very much for joining us on the show. Thanks for your opinions. Always a pleasure. Now, after turning away from Labour in 2019 in favour of the Brexit-backing Conservatives, Red Wall voters are once again in the spotlight ahead of polling stations opening tomorrow morning. But in this election, will industrial heartlands of the Midlands, my part of the world, and the North return to their roots or set a new political course? Well, with issues that date back many decades, some in former mining communities like Ashfield, they feel politics won't bring the change that's so desperately needed. And our East Midlands reporter, Will Hollis, has this story.
Living amongst the coalfields and steelworks, Red Wall communities had everything: employment, housing, purpose. The deep wound of industry's disappearance in the final decades of the 20th century is still healing. Simon, a leader at the local college, has worked in Sutton in Ashfield since the 90s.
In many areas of Ashfield, in many neighbourhoods, there are the obvious signs and indicators of poverty and disadvantage.
If England means as much to...
At a coffee morning run by the college, spirits are raised. The football is tying people together. Meanwhile, the election is testing the fabric of Britain's democracy. Here, crime and antisocial behaviour are priorities.
You do hear of it, people having bags snatched and things like that. So, yeah, I think policing's a big issue around this area.
Not far from the Downing Street here in Ashfield, some of the poorest parts of the Red Wall can be found. The problems here stretch past a term of Parliament.
The issues to do with unemployment, people adjusting to new ways of needing to learn and learn new skills for new employment, they've been around for a long time.
Ashfield is a single brick in the former Red Wall. In 2019, the switch from Labour to the Conservatives, influenced by Brexit, surprised the nation. The promise of levelling up has brought millions of pounds for local projects, but critics say it's not enough. Now, voter trends in the Red Wall are tricky to predict. The challenge that candidates in Red Wall constituencies face is whether they can convince voters that change is possible when the problems they face stretch between generations over decades. At a nearby food bank, volunteers and staff from the college help the desperate.
We've had one come in this morning who's actually just been released from custody.
Few people using the service think politics can change the life they're living, says Sandra.
They're quite disillusioned with politics. They're thinking that things are not going to change in the way that they need them to be.
Voters here have a hand in deciding the direction Britain takes next. But Parliament, the place where the future of the Red Wall rests, feels very far away. Will Hollis, GB News in Ashfield.
Yeah, Ashfield, a seat I know very well. In fact, I stood as a candidate in the last election in 2019, and the candidates for the Ashfield constituency this time are as follows. Ria Keane for the Labour Party, Debbie Solomon for the Conservative Party, Daniel Holmes is the Liberal Democrats candidate, Lee Anderson for Reform UK, Alexander Coates, the Green Party, and Jason Zadrozny for the Ashfield Independents. Now, we've got some breaking news for you now, and the Sun newspaper has officially come out and backed Keir Starmer in the general election. It says Keir Starmer has won the right to govern. Tomorrow's front page, time for a new manager, and we're not talking about Gareth Southgate. In the grand old tradition of the Sun backing the candidate that's sure to win, the Sun, to repeat, has come out and saying they back Keir Starmer at tomorrow's general election. Now, coming up, we'll be crossing to Northern Ireland as former DUP leader Sir Geoffrey Donaldson has been sent for trial over allegations of historical sex offences. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
we'll be there.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Britain's newsroom, weekday mornings from 9:30.
Well, we've got quite an extraordinary story to talk to you about now because a triple amputee war hero is launching a bid to become the first to sail across the Pacific Ocean non-stop, solo and unsupported.
Craig Wood was blown up as a teenager by the Taliban in Afghanistan, but now he's hoping to change the perception of disabled people and raise money for other limbless veterans like himself. And Craig joins us now. Morning.
So, Craig, you are extraordinary. You are planning to take up to 80 days to sail from La Paz in Mexico to Japan.
Yeah.
How many miles is that?
It'll be over 6,000.
Amazing.
Amazing. And it will take you how long?
The minimum it's going to take me is 60 days. It could be up to 80. Yeah.
And that's on your own. You've done plenty of this before, haven't you? You've done lots of solo sailing.
Yeah, I've done quite a bit of solo sailing, but not as big as this. It is the world's biggest ocean, after all.
And why that particular route?
I wanted it to be a challenge, not just for me, but for anyone.
Right.
So any able-bodied person can look at this and go, wow, that is difficult.
Yeah.
And so that was the main drive. Then it's become a bigger thing than that now. Now I'm raising money for charity and I can truly inspire people to change their perception on what is possible for disabled people.
And if you don't mind, can we ask you what happened in 2009 in Afghanistan? What were the circumstances of your injury?
I was on a normal routine foot patrol. About 5 metres in front of me, a commando IED was triggered. And subsequently, I became a triple amputee. Both legs above the knee, left hand at the wrist, facial injuries, etc., etc.
The People's Channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
This election night, we're putting on a party.
And you are invited.
We'll be here with you.
Following all the twists and turns.
As well as all the live reaction from our election night watch party.
With our GB News lineup.
And as morning breaks, we'll be here with breakfast from 6 a.m.
As it becomes clear who the winners and the losers really are.
Vote 2024.
Tomorrow night from 9:55.
Only on GB News, Britain's election channel.
And don't miss our big exclusive interview with the Reform UK leader Nigel Farage. You'll speak to our political editor Chris Hope and our Vote 2024, the Leaders Special. And that's exclusively on GB News from 7 o'clock here this evening on GB News. And later in today's show, I'll be speaking to Chris, who sat down with Nigel Farage for a couple of pints for this final interview of this campaign. And we'll have a sneak peek into that interview later on in the show. I'll be joined by Chris around about 5 p.m. You heard it here first. Now, moving on, former DUP leader Sir Geoffrey Donaldson has been sent for trial over allegations of historical sexual offences. A district judge at Newry Magistrates Court said he was satisfied that the 61-year-old and his wife and co-accused Lady Eleanor Donaldson had a prima facie case to answer during a committal hearing earlier on today. Well, we can now go and get the latest with GB News' Northern Ireland reporter Dougie Beattie. Dougie Beattie, what's the latest from over there?
Well, you're quite correct in what you said. The 61-year-old Sir Geoffrey Donaldson arrived at the court this morning. He arrived about 10 minutes ahead of his wife, Lady Eleanor. They both stood in the dock, flanked by prison officers. Sir Geoffrey was to answer 7 more counts. He originally appeared with 11, Lady Eleanor with 4. That's now up to 18, and Lady Eleanor up to 5. This really was a preliminary hearing. It was more or less handing this over from the Magistrates' Court to the Crown Court. It will be the date for arraignment has been set on the 10th of September, and it is expected that the trial date will follow after that, probably in the new year. Amongst the counts to Sir Geoffrey Donaldson was 1 of rape, 4 of gross inconduct, and 13 of sexual abuse. This has been a total shock for Northern Ireland since it broke just the day before Good Friday, and Sir Geoffrey Donaldson gave no reaction as the counts were handed out, and he has very much decided that this is going to go to trial.
OK, Doogie, so any idea of when we can expect any kind of resolution on this?
Well, it will more than likely be February. I'd imagine the trial the hearing on the 10th of September will be trying to weed out what they are going to appeal and what they're not going to appeal, what they think they can win, and so forth. So really, from that point on, you can understand we can't go too deeply into this because of legalities. But at that particular juncture on the 10th of September, we will have more of an idea of what he is going to be facing, probably in February next year.
Thank you for that update on the case of Geoffrey Donaldson. Thank you very much. Now, just a reminder of the breaking news just out. And the Sun newspaper has now officially backed Keir Starmer in the general election. It says Sir Keir Starmer has won the right to govern. Tomorrow's front page reads, "Time for a new manager," and we're not talking about Gareth Southgate. Now, don't forget that the Sun newspaper generally backs the Prime Minister candidate who looks nailed on to win. And then they like to say it's the Sun what won it, with all the polls, all talks of super majorities. Not being funny, I predicted this a couple of weeks ago. Call me a Grinnell cynic, but I've just been around a long time. Now, I've got a bunch of your says in, and I asked you at the top of the show, what do you make of Boris Johnson's comeback last night? Was it the silver bullet the campaign needed? Was it the get-out-of-jail card? Or actually, has it brought the Conservatives more problems? Well, you've been greatly split on your take on this. Let's read out a few of them now. Rob says this: had Boris Johnson still been the Prime Minister, then I would have not hesitated to have voted for the Conservatives, but I would never vote for Rishi Sunak, and I never will vote for the Tories again. For me, it's Nigel Farage all the way. Penny adds this: for many of your viewers, Martin, including myself, I believe there was a stitch-up about Boris Johnson and the Partygate story was overplayed. Starmer and Sunak both had fines, but we hear little of that. Boris was targeted from day one. So broadly supportive of Boris there, but it changes with this comment from Jason, who says this: I'd just like to say that I can't believe that I'm the only viewer who sees the rollouts of Boris as rather pathetic. Not just that, it's really quite offensive to the public. He's been on holiday for the whole campaign, and then out of sheer desperation, they bring Boris back to give a passionate speech about doing the right thing for the country. I hope people can see how disrespectful this is. And I'll quickly get this one in from Andy, who adds this: great to see Boris Johnson back to remind voters why they hate the Tories so much. Well, if only Truss, Cameron and May had been wheeled out like that too, then it could be 0 Conservatives in Parliament on Friday. You know, I've been really surprised by the outpouring of sentiment around Boris Johnson. Even as long as a few months ago, lots of support for Boris Johnson. That seems to very much have withered away. Get in touch if you want to have your say. GBNews.com/your say. Now, there's lots more still to come between now and 4 o'clock. And we'll be getting the latest from the Liberal Democrats campaign. Are they going to smash the so-called blue wall and become the second party in Parliament? We'll find out how they're feeling ahead of tomorrow. We'll join their campaign trail. But first, it's your headlines with Sam Francis.
Martin, thank you very much, and good afternoon to you. It's just after 3:30. The top story, the Sun newspaper has now endorsed a Labour victory at tomorrow's election, with an editorial declaring that it's time for change of manager. Well, Sir Keir Starmer is making his final pitch with a message to voters that if they want change, they must vote for it. The Liberal Democrats offered a similar assessment, with Sir Ed Davey describing Mr Johnson's reappearance as bizarre and a sign that voters are ready to move on. It comes after the former Prime Minister made his first and only speech of the election campaign, saying that a Labour government would mean higher taxes. A Conservative minister has conceded that Labour is likely to win a landslide majority. Mel Stride told GB News that while he accepts polls pointing to a big win for Labour, only voters can decide the final outcome. Those comments come after an editorial was published in The Telegraph today by former Home Secretary Suella Braverman, who says the Conservatives must prepare for the frustration of opposition. Hurricane Beryl is still swirling towards Jamaica after a powerful Category 4 storm flattened homes across several islands. At least 6 people were killed as the storm inflicted large-scale damage with winds of 145 miles an hour. It's now moving towards Jamaica, where it's expected to batter the shoreline with life-threatening winds and a storm surge. And the King and the Queen are in Scotland for their annual Holyrood Week. His Majesty joined Queen Camilla at a service in Edinburgh, celebrating the Order of the Thistle at St Giles's Cathedral. The Prince of Wales and the Duke and Duchess of Edinburgh were also in attendance for an extra special service as the Scottish capital celebrates 900 years.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
And let's take a look at the markets for you this afternoon. The pound will buy you $1.2763 and €1.1812. The price of gold, £1,849 and 38 pence per ounce. And the FTSE 100 this hour is at 8,173 points.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you, Sam. Now, if you want to get in touch with us here at GB News, simply go to gbnews.com/your say. I'll read out a bunch of the best messages a little later in the show. They've already been fantastic. Please keep them coming. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hello, good afternoon. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update from the Met Office. Through the rest of the day, there'll be some further rain and drizzle, but it will turn clearer across the north and west. But then things do turn quite windy as we head into Thursday. That's because low pressure's up to the north of the UK, and you can see those tightly packed isobars. That indicates stronger winds. So it will turn quite breezy through this evening across the far northwest of Scotland and then elsewhere overnight and into Thursday. But it will turn clearer and brighter by tomorrow morning. So clear skies overnight for many of us once that rain does clear the far southeast. Temperatures will dip down a little lower than they have done lately, so a slightly fresher start to the day, but there's going to be more sunshine around for most of us to start the day on Thursday. But also those strong winds. We could see gale force winds up to the west of Scotland and also some very persistent, heavy, potentially thundery showers moving in across the Western Isles, the Highlands, down into southwestern areas of Scotland as well. Also risk of showers for Northern Ireland. Clearer and drier for much of the rest of the UK, for much of Wales, central areas of England, northeastern England as well, and much of southern areas as well. But there will be a bit of a breeze around through Thursday, and I think as we head into the afternoon, that wind will strengthen elsewhere away from the far northwest, where there will be quite frequent showers through much of the day. But actually, for most of us, it's going to be a sunnier and drier day as we head into Thursday. The best of the sunshine will be across southeastern areas. Temperatures climbing a little higher than today in the sheltered sunshine, 21 degrees at best, but very fresh feel further north and west in the low teens for some of us. Then through Thursday evening, we start to see this spell of wet weather spread in from the south and west, and that's going to become a much bigger feature as we head into Friday. So more widely a wetter day on Friday, and then we're into sunshine and showers as we head into the weekend before it warms up a little into the start of next week.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Jules Buckley. The southbound M6 is queuing. A lane shut for an earlier vehicle fire, so slow going between junctions 2 and 1. That's Coventry down towards the Rugby turn-off. Northbound M42 slow going too. Just before the turn-off for Coleshill Junction 9, a lane shut. 2 cars and a lorry there have had a collision. The queue's back towards Junction 7. Wiltshire, eastbound M4 between Swindon East 15 and Hungerford 14. Lane 1's come off. There's a breakdown there. Also eastbound on the M4 at Atheel at Junction 12, a lane closed on the exit slip there, causing delays. There's a breakdown. And queue still for the southbound side of the Colchester bypass at the A12. Still a lane closure in place between junctions 28 and 27. It's all due to an overturned vehicle. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
This election night, we're putting on a party.
And you are invited.
We'll be here with you.
Following all the twists and turns.
As well as all the live reaction from our election night watch party.
With our GB News lineup.
And as morning breaks, we'll be here with breakfast from 6 a.m.
As it becomes clear who the winners and the losers really are.
Vote 2024.
Tomorrow night from 9:55.
Only on GB News, Britain's election channel.
Now, just hours before Britain goes to the polling booths tonight, Patrick Christys will be hosting a special show with a live studio audience. If you'd like to join us here in the studio tonight at gbnews.com, there's still time. You can go to gbnews.com to reserve your ticket for this exclusive, superb event. Get stuck in. Well, voters have given their verdict on the return of Boris Johnson and whether it's simply too little, too late for the Conservatives.
I think it's a good thing for the Tories. He should have come in earlier, probably, as soon as the election it was announced. But good on him for coming in now.
I think it's too late, and the reason why is I think people are just fed up of all the lies. Do you know what I mean? When COVID was around, etc., everybody had to follow the rules, and it seems that they didn't. Do you know what I mean?
Well, it would have been brilliant, but I don't know if he is. I mean, I voted for Boris last time, and he was a brilliant bloke. But the way they got rid of him, I didn't like it.
What would happen if it was Boris Johnson standing now in Rishi Sunak's place?
Oh, definitely would have voted for Boris, definitely.
I think it had been good if he'd actually was running, because I think there's quite a few people that might have voted for him. But I think just campaigning for somebody else, I don't think it's going to do the trick.
As usual, I think Boris is just blowing his own trumpet. He's not actually supporting Sunak, is he? So, what's the point?
And we've certainly got a load of top emails on that topic. I'll read them out shortly. But meanwhile, the leader of the Liberal Democrats, Sir Ed Davey, is out on the campaign trail once again and was asked whether tomorrow's election could be a breakthrough for his party.
Well, we're not complacent. We want to make sure we work through to 10 p.m. tomorrow to make sure we earn the votes. But across the home counties in former Tory heartlands, what I'd call the Blue Wall, in the West Country, across rural Britain, in rural Wales, rural Scotland, rural England, we're finding so many former Conservatives switching to us. And so, you know, we haven't put a ceiling on our ambition. If people want to back the Liberal Democrats with our policies on health and care, on getting the economy back on track, on dealing with our environmental problems from the sewage scandal to climate change, they need to go out and vote for their local Liberal Democrat. They'll know they'll get a champion for their community, but they can also back the Liberal Democrats as we build our party and make a major force in the next Parliament.
Ed Davey there, down on the farm, ploughing on. It's quite novel to see him with his clothes on. He spent so much time in the water, on water slides, on donuts, in dinghies, you name it, on paddle boards. But there he was, fully clothed on a farm. Now, thank you for getting in touch with your messages, and I can get to a few of those now. And on the topic of the Sun newspaper, we just broke that news. The Sun newspaper has just come out and said they are backing Sir Keir Starmer. It's time for a change of management, they said. And we're not talking about Gareth Southgate. Michael says this: the Sun is ignorant. Labour have not won the right to govern. They will take power only because the stupid Tories betrayed their voters. Please don't give the Labour Party any credit for this. They have simply inherited an incompetent situation. I believe they could be dangerous. It's worth pointing out, Michael, that the Sun newspaper tends to back the person who's guaranteed to win the election. That's why they backed Tony Blair and suddenly became Conservative after that. The day before they voted to back Sir Keir Starmer. Would it make any difference to how you vote? Newspapers used to have a huge sway over the electorate. It's the Sun what won it, they used to like to claim. But you tell me, has this in any way shifted the dial on how you intend to vote? Do you listen to newspapers anymore, or do you listen to alternative media? Things like GBNews. Have you made your mind up in your own intelligent way? Now, Diane, on that precise point, adds this: my mind is already made up, and nothing and nobody will change my mind. No media smears will work, no hit campaigns will work. For me, Reform is the only party that will get this country back on track, and the Labour Party will only offer what Tony Blair is offering. Diane, a slight bit of cynicism there, but a lot of people do believe that is Tony Blair involved behind the scenes. And quickly, Fred says this on the Boris comeback. Boris has come back for one thing and one thing only, Boris. I think he wants a knighthood. Thanks for those views, and please keep them coming in. It's time now for the Great British Giveaway, and it's a massive one. Your chance to win a whopping £30,000 tax-free cash. It's our biggest prize to date, and here's how you could win the lot.
It's our summer treat to you. Your chance to win an incredible £30,000 in tax-free cash. Our biggest cash prize of the year so far. With an extra £30,000 in your bank account this year, you could take the ultimate financial holiday and send some of those day-to-day financial stresses packing. £30,000 could get you those nagging home improvements done, buy that brand new car, or just enable you to kick back and relax for the rest of the year. For a chance to win £30,000 in tax-free cash, text cash to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2. Or post your name and number to GB07 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 30th of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Coming up, we'll be discussing the ongoing search for missing British teen Jay Slater as a new picture has emerged showing the man who was renting the Airbnb which Slater visited just hours before he vanished. Don't go anywhere, we'll have a full update. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
In World War I, 309 men from Britain and the Commonwealth never came home because they'd been shot at dawn. The majority were killed for desertion, cowardice and sleeping at post. Appearing at their court-martials and told they'd brought shame on their country, these men had no opportunity to defend themselves and were executed by a firing squad. The National Memorial Arboretum launched a fundraising campaign to restore the memorial, which has stood for more than 20 years.
Thank you to your viewers for their support for the fundraising campaign, and thanks to the generosity of so many people, we've been able to replace all 309 of the posts that represent those young men that were shot in the First World War. Restoration of this really precious memorial.
The centrepiece of the memorial is the young soldier, blindfolded and facing his execution. In September 1916, Private Harry Farr was ordered to the front. Already suffering from shell shock, he was overwhelmed and refused his orders. He was court-martialed, and in a trial lasting only 20 minutes, he was sentenced to death. On the day of his execution, he faced the firing squad without a blindfold. Janet Booth is Private Farr's granddaughter and was part of the public campaign to have those who were shot at dawn officially pardoned.
When I asked my gran, do you know where I could find Harry's grave? And she looked at my mother, and there was this sort of look between them, and then she said, well, he hasn't got a grave because they didn't warrant, he deserved one because he was shot as a coward and had let his country down. We can come here as a family and pay our respects to him, and also for all the other families, it's somewhere to come and remember their loved one.
The People's Channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threat and so on.
As time passes, she could have said stump.
You made my argument for me.
My guests and I tackle the issues that really matter with a sharp take on every story.
It went everywhere. Something practical could be done.
Or I can become something different.
Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Now, don't miss our big exclusive interview with the Reform UK leader, Nigel Farage. He'll speak to our political editor, Christopher Hope, in our Vote 2024, the Leaders Special. And that's exclusively on 7 o'clock from this evening here on GB News. And I've seen a quick sneak peek of that. It really is fabulous stuff. And I hope to bring you a quick chat with Chris Hope after that interview on the show, around about 5 o'clock, and a sneak peek of what to expect in what will be surely Nigel's big final sit-down before the general election polls open tomorrow morning at 7 a.m. Nigel Farage on GB News, 7 p.m. this evening. Moving on now for an update on the ongoing search for missing British teenager Jay Slater, and a new picture has emerged, as you can see on your screen, showing the man who was renting the Airbnb which Slater visited just hours before he vanished. The image, which comes from the Daily Mail, shows a Brit who uses the name Ayab Abdul. And Abdul booked the holiday rental online for £40 per night and later hosted the missing teenager shortly before he disappeared. What a fresh piece of evidence, and let's dive into that now by speaking to the former detective who led the Lambeth Missing Persons Unit, Mike Neville. Mike, welcome to the show. Always a pleasure to have your company. A lot of questions were asked at the time, Mike, about that apartment, about the individuals inside there. Talk about 2 individuals that Slater was seen with in the last hours he's around. Now, this latest piece of information come out about the host. Everything seems now to be focusing, Mike Neville, onto this property, does it not?
Well, that's right. The Spanish police said at the time that they'd spoken to these men, they'd recorded their details, and they were not part of the investigation anymore. But that now seems to have changed. And there's all sorts of information coming out in the media that Jay was involved, or allegedly involved, in an incident involving a watch. And there's all sorts of Snapchats have just appeared, which allegedly was sent to the family. So there's all these strange things coming forward, people coming forward 5 and 10 and 15 days after the event, which is very difficult when you're investigating and you're expecting people to come over with information straight away. I mean, you've just shown the CCTV image. Still at this stage, we don't have any verification of where that was from or if it's Jay in the slightest. And at the same time, you've got the issue of, did he simply go missing, or is there something more complex here? Because the phone calls he allegedly made, because we're relying on witnesses, say that he was, tired, he'd cut himself, needed a drink, and he only had 1% battery. So with those statements, there's no evidence of criminality. But then you've got this background noise of this alleged theft of a watch, and then these 2 men who we went to this Airbnb for no particular reason. So there's lots going on here, and the Spanish police have got to get this right, because the British public really demanding answers as to what's happened to this lad.
And Mike Neville, you and I spoke very early on in this case, and we were saying at the time it was incredible that those two individuals who were linked to Jay Slater's final hours had just been allowed to leave the country, seemingly without being questioned. And then we saw this extrapolated, wide area, rough terrain search, fanning out with drones, with helicopters, with dogs, with search teams. And now, once again, Mike, the telescope has been flipped back onto a much more concentrated area, back to that property. It just seems, Mike, that maybe the answer was staring them in the face all along in that apartment.
Absolutely. And what you've got as well is the other thing as well is all sorts of other holiday makers who are attending the clubs and the raves who have now dispersed. They've left that island. They've gone back to UK. Where are they? Well, they could be anywhere. And so all sorts of videos and stuff have been lost and opportunities. You know, in the police, you call this the golden hour, the first 24 hours. And everything seems to have been gambled on. He's gone missing in that wooded area. Now, in my view, likelihood, that is probably the case. But they need to look into these other avenues. The Spanish police are saying it's not a criminal investigation, it's a missing persons inquiry. But there's all these other things in the background that have got to be clarified to see, is there any link to this at all? But it's a very, very strange mystery, and we can only hope that the lad is found and his parents get some kind of closure.
It just seems astonishing, Mike, that, I mean, if you were conducting a campaign, a search party on the ground like this, surely you would just begin with the last known sightings, the last known locations, and comb for evidence, for electronic evidence, you know, phones, CCTV, anything, before kind of going right across the island and all the manpower, the time, the resources that takes. It just seems incredible that these basics were overlooked.
Well, it just seems like there's been one focus. So we do know that there was a GPS or his phone pinged at a certain place in the park. So the police did the right thing by searching that area and fanning out from where that ping was that he allegedly said he was on his own, his battery was running out, etc. But in the background to this, from the very start, there's been all sorts of rumours and allegations of crime of some kind, and that doesn't seem to have been done. The other thing that's been bad as well, in my view, is the way that the police have handled the press and releasing things. Because we almost see like a life on Mars sort of situation here, where it's the 1970s, tell the press nothing, don't brief. You know, they cancel the search. There's not a police briefing by a senior officer with the journalist there. And I just think that has been handled very, very badly. And it's almost like they're doing it because the Spanish public aren't that interested, not realising the international interest in this case.
Fascinating stuff, as ever. Mike Neville, thank you for sharing your huge experience. Of course, former head of Lambeth Missing Persons Unit. Your expertise, always very much appreciated. Thank you very much indeed. Now, loads to come. Loads of you have been getting in touch, particularly on the election campaign trail, on the topic of the Sun backing Sir Keir Starmer. You've been quite cynical about that. We'll have plenty more to bring you in just a moment, including all the latest from the general election campaign trail. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel. Before we tuck in and a sneak peek into that Nigel Farage exclusive, it's time for your weather with Annie Shuttleworth.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, good afternoon. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update from the Met Office. Through the rest of the day, there'll be some further rain and drizzle, but it will turn clearer across the north and west. But then things do turn quite windy as we head into Thursday. That's because low pressure's up to the north of the UK, and you can see those tightly packed isobars. That indicates stronger winds. So it will turn quite breezy through this evening across the far northwest of Scotland and then elsewhere overnight and into Thursday. But it will turn clearer and brighter by tomorrow morning. So clear skies overnight for many of us once that rain does clear the far southeast. Temperatures will dip down a little lower than they have done lately, so a slightly fresher start to the day, but there's going to be more sunshine around for most of us to start the day on Thursday. But also those strong winds. We could see gale force winds up to the west of Scotland, and also some very persistent, heavy, potentially thundery showers moving in across the Western Isles, the Highlands, down into southwestern areas of Scotland as well. Also risk of showers for Northern Ireland. Clearer and drier for much of the rest of the UK, for much of Wales, central areas of England, northeastern England as well, and much of southern areas as well. But there will be a bit of a breeze around through Thursday, and I think as we head into the afternoon, that wind will strengthen elsewhere away from the far northwest, where there will be quite frequent showers through much of the day. But actually, for most of us, it's going to be a sunnier and drier day as we head into Thursday. The best of the sunshine will be across southeastern areas. Temperatures climbing a little higher than today in the sheltered sunshine, 21 degrees at best, but very fresh feel further north and west in the low teens for some of us. Then through Thursday evening, we start to see this spell of wet weather spread in from the south and west, and that's going to become a much bigger feature as we head into Friday. So more widely a wetter day on Friday, and then we're into sunshine and showers as we head into the weekend before it warms up a little into the start of next week.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon. Hello again. I'm Jules Buckley. Let's go to Norfolk firstly. And if you're heading west on the A143, that stretch is closed between Low Road in Skull and Suston Lane in Suston. An overturned lorry means you can't get through westbound. Eastbound traffic is now able, though, to get through. Now, the anti-clockwise M25 still seeing long delays towards the M4 to junction 15. Heavy back towards the M40 interchange at junction 16 follows an earlier collision. All lanes are open, though. Gravel Hill in New Addington in London, the A212 shut between Shirley Hills Road and Kent Gate Way. A delay at the scene of a collision there. And Heathfield in East Sussex, the A267 blocked between the garage and Pook Reed Lane. There's queues building whilst a multi-vehicle collision there is still being dealt with this afternoon. And for now, that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
It's our summer treat to you. Your chance to win an incredible £30,000 in tax-free cash. Our biggest cash prize of the year so far. With an extra £30,000 in your bank account this year, you could take the ultimate financial holiday and send some of those day-to-day financial stresses packing. £30,000 could get you those nagging home improvements done, buy that brand new car, or just enable you to kick back and relax for the rest of the year. For a chance to win £30,000 in tax-free cash, text cash to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2. Or post your name and number to GB07 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 30th of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
This election night, we're putting on a party.
And you are invited.
We'll be here with you.
Following all the twists and turns.
As well as all the live reaction from our election night watch party.
With our GB News lineup.
And as morning breaks, we'll be here with breakfast from 6 a.m.
As it becomes clear who the winners and the losers really are.
Vote 2024.
Thursday, the 4th of July.
Only on GB News.
Britain's election channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Jubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the arguments. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got, in my opinion? The best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
A A very good afternoon to you and a happy General Election Eve. It's 4 p.m. Welcome to the Martin Daubney Show on GB News, broadcasting live from the heart of Westminster, all across the UK. On today's show, Sunak's last roll of the dice. With only 15 hours to go until polling stations open, Rishi Sunak is throwing the kitchen sink, and even Boris Johnson at the campaign trail chasing every last vote. Could a last-minute miracle be on the cards, or is a Sir Keir Starmer supermajority simply now a shoo-in? And surely the Prime Minister's cause hasn't been helped by the Sun newspaper backing Sir Keir Starmer, saying he's earned the right to govern. Tomorrow's front page, as you can see on your screen, says it's time for a new manager, and we don't mean sack Gareth Southgate. I'll get reaction from a government minister shortly. Next up, Ukraine too corrupt for NATO. Yes, Ukraine has been declared too corrupt for the alliance in a major blow to President Zelensky. And with $380 billion of Western money in aid already sent to Ukraine, do we have a right to know where is our money going? And a very Merry Christmas early present from London Mayor Sadiq Khan. In yet another U-turn, London Mayor Sadiq Khan has slapped the congestion charge on electric vehicles on motorists, yes, from Christmas Day. Is this latest assault on the motorist a taste of what's to come under Labour's green plans if they get in tomorrow? That's all coming up in your next hour. Welcome to the show. Well, just hours to go. Are you counting those hours off, or we'd be glad to see the back of it all? Well, before that, we've got a sneak taste of an exclusive sit-down interview that we've done with Reform UK leader Nigel Farage. His last supper, well, actually, it was the last couple of pints with Chris Hope, our political editor. We'll have a sneak peek of that coming up. A no-holds-barred interview on General Election Eve. Get in touch all the usual ways. Have you made your mind up yet? The Sun newspaper has come out and backed Sir Keir Starmer. Call me a cynic. They always back the guy or the girl who's about to win the election with an overriding majority. Do newspapers inform your opinion anymore, or have you made your mind up in other ways? Say, for example, by watching intelligent news outlets like GB News. Now get in touch, gbnews.com/you'll say. But before we kick into the show, it's your headlines now, and it's Sam Francis.
Martin, thank you very much, and good afternoon to you. It's just after 4 o'clock, and as we heard there at the top of the programme, leading the news this afternoon, the nation's biggest-selling newspaper is now backing Labour at tomorrow's election for the first time since 2005. The Sun's made that announcement with an editorial declaring that it's time for a change of manager. It comes as political parties make their final pitches to voters today. Rishi Sunak insisting the race isn't over, while Sir Keir Starmer says a big Labour win would give him the mandate he needs to repair what he called broken Britain.
We are fighting for every vote, and across the country there will be constituencies which will go down to the wire. And therefore we will continue to fight until 10 o'clock tomorrow night, making the case that change only happens if you vote for it. But it is a huge opportunity for our country. This is the opportunity to turn the page and to move forward. And I want people to go out and vote for change and be part of the change that I think will bring about such a different and better future for our country.
And Boris Johnson returned to the campaign trail last night with a warning that a Labour win would mean electing Britain's most left-wing government since the Second World War. In his first and final appearance on the election campaign trail, the former Prime Minister said that putting Sir Keir Starmer in number 10 would, he said, mean higher taxes. And meanwhile, the Liberal Democrats are telling voters the election is a chance to build a caring nation. The party says they've struck a balance between fun and serious in their campaign and insists its message on health, social care and cleaning up Britain's waters is resonating with voters. Reflecting, though, on Boris Johnson's appearance last night, Sir Ed Davey said it's time to move on.
It's bizarre that the Conservatives are reminding people of the failures. I think people want to move on from Boris Johnson and Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak and all the damage they've done to our country, and they want to know what you're going to do in the future, how you're going to change our country, particularly how you're going to sort out NHS and care, and that's what Liberal Democrats are talking about. We want to make sure we build a caring nation where the importance of social care and family carers is really at the front, so we can both give them the support they need, but also transform our NHS at the same time by investing in care.
Well, turning to some news into us from the US, President Biden has reportedly told a key ally that he is weighing up whether to remain as the Democratic nominee in November's election. According to a report in the New York Times, the president believes the next few days will be crucial to determine whether he will remain in the race. It comes after the US news website Puck reported a leaked poll which shows the president's support has started to fall in some key states. It also found that Vice President Kamala Harris would perform better in a hypothetical match against Donald Trump. Here, the daughter of Captain Sir Tom Moore has been disqualified from being a charity trustee. The Charities Commission blocked Hannah Ingram Moore and her husband Colin from taking on charitable roles after looking into Captain Tom Foundation shortly after his death in 2021. It came amid concerns about the charity's management and independence from Captain Tom's family. Australian police will resume their search for a 12-year-old child who was reportedly attacked by a crocodile while swimming. The alert was raised last night in Palumpa, a remote town near Darwin in the Northern Territory. Police said the child was last seen swimming in Mango Creek before a group of others before they noticed the child had vanished. Police say the search will continue into the evening. Hurricane Beryl is still swirling towards Jamaica after the powerful Category 4 storm flattened homes across several islands. At least 6 people are now known to have died as the storm inflicted large-scale damage with winds of 145 miles an hour. The ferocious storm comes unusually early in the year's hurricane season. Scientists say the rapid pace of its approach is partly due to climate change. Well, it's now moving towards Jamaica, where it's expected to batter the shoreline with life-threatening winds and storm surges. And the King and Queen are in Scotland today for their annual Holyrood Week. His Majesty joined Queen Camilla at a service in Edinburgh, celebrating the Order of the Thistle at St Giles's Cathedral. The Prince of Wales and the Duke and Duchess of Edinburgh were also in attendance for an extra special service as the Scottish capital celebrates 900 years. Those are the top stories from the GB Newsroom for now. I'm Sam Francis, back with you in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you, Sam. Now, only one story in town on General Election Eve, and it's Rishi Sunak has just hours left to save his political career. But his cause hasn't been helped by this, because tomorrow's front page of the Sun newspaper, as you can see on your screens, it's backing Sir Keir Starmer, saying it's time for a new manager. And we're not talking about sacking Southgate. And it comes after Boris Johnson urged voters to back the Tories and reject what he called the Putinistas letting in the Corbynistas. Now, this was in sharp contrast to Suella Braverman, who, of course, warned that it was all over for the Tories and that this election could even spell the end of the Conservative Party. Now, the Sun's endorsement of the Labour Party is yet another blow to the Conservative Party. Is former Home Secretary Suella Braverman right? Is it over for the Tories? Well, I'm now joined by the Minister of State for Schools, Damian Hinds. Damian Hinds, welcome to the show. Let's start with the Sun. Of course, they like to claim it's the Sun what won it. They backed Maggie Thatcher, they backed Tony Blair, they backed David Cameron, they backed Theresa May, they backed Boris Johnson. They tend to back the one that's going to win it anyway. Now they've come out and backed Sir Keir Starmer. Nevertheless, not the kind of gift you'd like to be unwrapping on General Election Eve, is it?
Well, it's a great British newspaper, The Sun, but I think The Sun's great British readers will make up their own minds, and they will look at, everyone has to make their own choice. It's not a by-election. It's about the future of the country. It's about whether we stick with a plan that is working. We are turning the corner. Times have been difficult, but things are getting better, and we've got a clear plan. People, I think, know that. They also know that under Labour, taxes are going to go up, 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 and that is something which I think will be playing very heavily on some readers' minds, as it will on everybody else's.
Now, Damien Hines, time for a new manager. The Sun says there, was it time for the old guard last night? And of course, I'm referring to wheeling out Boris Johnson. He was saying a sledgehammer majority could be coming. That would be the height of insanity. He called Nigel Farage a Kremlin crawler. Don't let the Putinistas deliver the Corbynistas. Typically floral. We're talking about him. Nevertheless, I can tell you, Mr. Hines, it hasn't gone down especially well with a lot of GB News viewers who feel this feels like a final act of desperation. After all, he was stabbed in the back by Rishi Sunak, wasn't he?
The Conservative Party is a big family, and it's right that all parts of the family come together at big moments. This is a big moment. It's a big moment. Look, it's not primarily about the Conservative Party. It's about this great country that we all love. And it is right that in the centre-right of British politics, we need a big, broad-based Conservative Party that can form governments, and that if we are going to be in opposition, that we can be a really effective opposition to a Labour government. And that has to include, as I say, it's a big family. A broad church is the phrase people sometimes use. And it's absolutely right that all leading members of the family come together at these important times and get across that key message that this is a choice between sticking with a plan that is working now that we are turning the corner, or going to the great unknown. We keep hearing this phrase, time for change, but we never hear the second half of that sentence, change to what? The only thing you can bet the bank on is that it's going to be under Labour. It's going to be more tax in place of our plan, which includes easing tax on hardworking families, but also making further progress in key areas like education that I have the honour to work on.
OK, you say more tax. We currently have the highest taxes since World War II. People don't feel particularly under tax at the moment. Can I pick up on a point you just made there, Mr. Hines, about the Conservative Party being a broad church? Nigel Farage, the leader of Reform UK, he made a point. He said the Tory party is a broad church, but is it a church that no longer has its faith, its religion, a church that's lost its way? Is it now so broad a church you're having to cater to Remainers in the Tory shires, hardcore Brexiteers who want low tax, low immigration? Is that the point? The Conservative Party is now so fragmented, so different in the way it stands and the way it views the world. There's little wonder that your voters are also fragmenting off into different directions.
Will you allow me half a minute just to come back to the point you made just now about the tax level? Because you are right. The current tax level is at historically high levels, and it is too high. There are some reasons for that. The cost of furlough and the self-employment schemes in Canada was £98 billion. Similar sorts of sums on cost of living payments to help people through that crisis. That was the right thing to do. And in COVID prevented mass unemployment. It did come at a big, big cost. But we do now need to bring down tax, and we're already doing that. Look, on your point about the breadth of the church and the depth of the religion. No, we absolutely have our core beliefs that we share across the Conservative Party. But it's also true in what is historically broadly speaking a two-party system like ours. You do need a really broad party to take in lots of different shades of opinion, and all parties are coalitions of different sorts. And our strength has always been coming together in the common interest of the country, to put aside differences, to make compromise with one another, to then present to the public a really credible manifesto, a credible programme for government that people of all shades of right of centre opinion in the mainstream can come behind. And that's what this Conservative Party manifesto is.
When you talk about a two-party system, don't you concur, though, or agree, or at least see the point that the Conservative Party feels like a two-party party? It feels like a very liberal side, and Brexit cruelly exposed that. More than half of Tory MPs campaigned against Brexit. Some gritted their teeth, put on their best rictus grin.
I campaigned for Remain. Then we had a referendum which Leave won. And I and so many others immediately accepted that because that was the verdict of the British people. And then we get on with delivering it. And actually, we can see fantastic opportunities that have come forward as a result of Brexit, including in trade deals around the world and indeed strong trading, strong exports to the EU itself, as well as various other things that we can do. And that's a good thing to celebrate. But yeah, on your broader sort of political science point, yes, it does. It is a broad organisation. It needs to be a broad organisation because that's how you can come together to present to the public, an integrated, credible plan for government. If you have lots of different bits all having their own propositions to people, that's fine. You can find something that you absolutely agree with. But if that party that appealed to you, that relatively small party that appealed to you, then got into government, you have no idea which of the things that you firmly believe in, it would then negotiate away in a coalition deal in order to form part of that government. With our system, you get to see those compromises before the election, and people can make a clear choice. In this case, a clear choice between a Labour Party that's going to put up your taxes and who knows what else, because they are so light on detail in their manifesto. A clear choice between that and our plan, our manifesto, fully costed, which is ambitious for our country and will take us forward.
OK, thanks for joining us. Less than 15 hours to go now until those polling stations open. Thank you very much for joining us. Minister of State for Schools, Damian Hinds. Thank you very much. Now let's speak now with GB News' political correspondent, Catherine Forster, who's been with the Conservatives campaign today. Catherine, you've been around the country, you've been up dales and down valleys. What's the latest as we approach the final hours?
Yes, good afternoon, Martin. Well, I've been with the Prime Minister again today, as I have all week. We are currently somewhere in Hampshire. We're at a Conservative club. I've had a look at the leaflet for the local MP here. Couldn't find the Prime Minister's name anywhere. When he came in, he got a great greeting. He was immediately set to work putting the various leaflets together to be delivered tomorrow. He picked up one and he started to have a read, and the lady sitting next to him said, "You don't have time to read it," which tickled me a bit, really, ticking off the current Prime Minister. But we had a lobby huddle. Journalists got to ask him questions in his previous stop, which was a primary school in Romsey and Southampton North. That's currently got an 11,000 Conservative majority. First of all, Lib Dem activists had already found out that he was coming, so they were there with all their banners. But we were saying to him, look at all this division. Suella Braverman saying the election's over, Mel Stride talking about a super majority, all the messaging, the fact that over the last 3 days, and in fact over the last weeks, we've just been going two seats that should be and have been previously super safe Conservatives, but that either Labour or the Lib Dems think they're going to take. He is still trying to sound upbeat, but it is becoming harder for him, isn't it? Because these polls keep dropping. They are all catastrophic for the Conservative Party. One piece of news I can bring you. He said on TV this morning that his favourite food was sandwiches. I can tell you specifically a club sandwich with chips and a Coca-Cola. And just one thing to add. Yesterday morning, I was out and about with the Prime Minister, got up at 2 o'clock in the morning. We were at a visit at 5. At 6:20, we were at some services, and he got McDonald's for basically all the press that were on the bus with him. He distributed it. I put it on X because it struck me as one of the most surreal moments of my life, being given McDonald's from the Prime Minister. But anyway, on X, it's had about 900,000 views, and a lot of people going, what's he doing in a road? Well, I'd just like to say we were at a service station. It was basically the end of, you know, the rows of cars that you have. It was just after 6 in the morning. Lots of other people going, why was it on the ground? Why was it on the ground? Well, you know, it was for a busload of people. We didn't have time to start seeking out picnic tables. So I just like to put a bit of context to that. But certainly the idea that the PM is dishing out McDonald's to very tired journalists has been popular with some. Some people have said, oh, what a nice guy. And a lot of other people have used that to have a pop at him. It does feel at the moment basically like he really can't do anything right.
Yeah, and a few uncharitable souls, Catherine, have been saying, would you like fries with that? Maybe he's getting ready for when he's out of work. Catherine, I'm not being that harsh. You've been on planes, trains and automobiles. You've been across the country. You've been across the continent on this campaign trail. You worked your socks off. Thank you very much for everything you've done on this campaign trail. Catherine Forster there, getting a McDonald's in a car park. Now, meanwhile, the leader of the Liberal Democrats, Sir Ed Davey, is out on the campaign trail and was asked whether tomorrow's election could be a breakthrough for his party.
Well, we're not complacent. We want to make sure we work through to 10 p.m. tomorrow to make sure we earn the votes. But across the home counties in former Tory heartlands, what I've called the Blue Wall, in the West Country, across rural Britain, in rural Wales, rural Scotland, rural England, we're finding so many former Conservatives switching to us. And so, you know, we haven't put a ceiling on our ambition. If people want to back the Liberal Democrats with our policies on health and care, on getting the economy back on track, on dealing with our environmental problems from the sewage scandal to climate change, they need to go out and vote for their local Liberal Democrat. They'll know they'll get a champion for their community, but they can also back the Liberal Democrats as we build our party and make a major force in the next Parliament.
Now, coming up in a massive blow for Volodymyr Zelensky, NATO will say Ukraine is simply too corrupt to join the alliance and request additional steps from Kyiv before membership talks progress. I'll be speaking to a military expert. Surely, is this a good thing? And where have all those billions of dollars gone? I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akweer, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
It's true. You're not wrong. No one will be cancelled.
Lovely. Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
So, question is, what can we do to get young people to eat healthy food? Here's dietitian and nutrition consultant Helen Bond. Helen, what do you think?
Eating habits formed at this age tend to persist into later life. We know we're eating too much fat, sugar, salt, and not enough of the good things like fibre, you know, fruits and vegetables, all of those things. So yes, we need to help this age group so they have the skill set and they have the nutrition knowledge to take that forward.
Do you agree that it is impossible to eat healthily on a budget and quickly as well, or do you have any sort of fail-safe, affordable and very quick to prep meals that you'd recommend youngsters try?
It doesn't have to be expensive either, but you have to have those kind of cost-cutting hacks and those time-saving things in the kitchen. You know, make use, I always say, of things like peas, beans and lentils, which are a type of pulse, very inexpensive compared to meat, and yet they double up as one of your 5 a day, and also a great source of plant-based protein. You know, if you overget a milk as something, you have too much milk, maybe make some lattes.
I just wanted to throw a shoe at the TV, really, because was there nothing else on or nothing else available? The point being, there is an audience, there's obviously an appeal, there's obviously people are watching this stuff. So what are they doing? Are they watching and not cooking?
I think that's it. They're watching and maybe enjoying all the cookery programmes like I do. And I'm a typical person in the kitchen. I must have about 100 cookbooks. But sometimes when you are time poor, you know, you've got to feed a family or you've got to feed yourself and everything, you don't really know where to start. And I think that's why apps and having things online for this younger audience makes it much more accessible. Start with one recipe and build it up from there. Like I said,
The People's Channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
we'll be there.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
This election night, we're putting on a party.
And you are invited.
We'll be here with you,
following all the twists and turns,
as well as all the live reaction from our election night watch party.
With our GB News lineup.
And as morning breaks, we'll be here with breakfast from 6 a.m.
As it becomes clear who the winners and the losers really are.
Vote 2024.
Tomorrow night from 9:55.
Only on GB News, Britain's election channel.
Don't miss our big interview with the exclusive, the Reform UK leader Nigel Farage. He'll speak to our political editor Chris Hope in our Vote 2024, the Leaders Special, exclusively on GB News from 7 p.m. this evening here on GB News. And I'm hoping to bring you a sneak peek of that before the end of this show. Now, moving on, Ukraine will be told it is currently too corrupt to join NATO in a major blow to Volodymyr Zelensky. The position will be set out in writing in a NATO letter to be signed at the alliance's annual summit on July the 9th. Now, the alliance will request additional steps from Kyiv before membership talks progress, according to senior officials in the US State Department. Now, NATO membership has been an aim of President Zelensky as he hopes to deter further aggression from Vladimir Putin's Russia. Well, to discuss this now, I'm joined by the former head of counter-terrorism at the MOD, Major General Chip Chapman. Chip, always a pleasure to have you on the show. Are you surprised by this? Or, I mean, we've known for quite some time that Ukraine has failed to meet internationally accepted standards on corruption. Transparency International, which is the global benchmark of this, currently has Ukraine on 104th out of 180 countries, a score out of 34 out of 100. A nation that's long struggled with corruption, particularly in the military, and that, should that be correctly used as a reason to rule them out of NATO membership?
Well, it is one of the reasons. There are actually three aspirant nations to join NATO at the moment: Ukraine, Bosnia and Georgia. Now, Bosnia is below Ukraine. I think you have to look at the path that they're going on. So the figures that you quoted from Transparency International, you have to remember that Zelensky was only elected in 2019, and in 2019 they were 126. They were 122nd in 2021. So the fact they're 104th means that the benchmark is getting better. Is it good enough at the moment? No, it's not. That was actually acknowledged in the Vilnius, Lithuania 2023 NATO conference, when it said that Ukraine wouldn't need to go through the membership action plan way of doing business, but that it would only be invited to join NATO when it was agreed by the other nations and that conditions were met. And corruption is one of those conditions. To be honest, it's never going to join NATO while it's in a state of conflict. Neither is it going to join the EU whilst it's firstly in a state of conflict, and secondly, it's corrupt, because one of the preconditions for the EU is that the functioning of the judiciary must include the fight against corruption. That does take place, and there have been lots of reforms in many areas, but there are still challenges in many judges in the lower courts are corrupt. And there is corporate governance is also a challenge for them, particularly in the way that some of the oligarchs look after the monopolies.
And Chip Chapman, even President Joe Biden raised significant corruption concerns earlier this year. He ruled out what he called the NATOization of Ukraine, specifically because he was concerned about corruption. Here's a nation, a former Soviet state, Chip, and particularly the military, has long been accused of corruption. That begs the next question. if it's so riddled with corruption and we've sent $380 billion of aid from Western nations and rising and significant amounts of armaments, do you think we have the right or the duty to ask the question, where's that money going?
Well, it's right to ask the question. One of the other reforms which has been in train is that state procurement has been reformed. Now, again, you have to remember what when Zelensky came to power in 2019, what his party was actually called. It was Servant of the People, because Yanukovych was the reason why the corruption of the president in 2014 was why the people revolted against him. And so Zelensky called his party the Servant of the People, which was the same name, of course, as his television program, precisely because before that, the people were seen to be the servants of the powerful and corrupt. And Zelensky was actually elected on the platform of anti-corruption. Now, the metric is getting better. Is it good enough at the moment? Of course it's not.
And so do you think that we should be putting this to one side? I mean, there are deeper strategic measures other than purely ticking the boxes of corruption. Do you think this should be a goal for Ukraine to get into NATO?
Well, it doesn't have to be. So there are alternative models. So one of the models early on, for example, was the notion of neutrality for Ukraine. But again, the notion of neutrality for Ukraine would really need three things. Firstly, depth, which it has in a geographic sense. Secondly, strong armed forces. And thirdly, security guarantees. Now, of course, it already had a security guarantee in 1994 because it gave up its nuclear weapons precisely in the Bucharest Memorandum, so that it wouldn't be invaded in the future by any country. That was deemed to be not the case. So you can go down a neutrality model, you can go down a NATO model. What is clear is that the whole notion of NATO expansion shows a fundamental flaw in understanding what NATO actually is. NATO doesn't expand as an imperialist nation. It expands by collective growth in membership nations that gives it security assurances from other imperialist nations, and it's Russia, which at the moment is seen to be the imperialist nation, not the status quo or defensive nation, which were the two other models for Russia that we always talked about when I first joined the army.
Superb stuff. Thanks for joining us. Always a pleasure to have your insights. Major General Chip Chapman, thank you very much for joining us on GB News. Now, there's lots more still to come between now and 5 o'clock, including former DUP leader Sir Geoffrey Donaldson has been sent for trial over allegations of historical sex offences and will be live from Belfast. But first, it's time for your latest news headlines with Sam Francis.
4:32 and the top stories from the GB newsroom this hour. The nation's biggest selling newspaper is backing Labour at tomorrow's election. That's for the first time since 2005. The Sun's made the announcement with an editorial declaring that it's time for a change of manager. Well, it comes as Sir Keir Starmer's making his final pitch to voters today with a warning not to count on predictions of a Labour win and urging people to go to the polls to secure change. Meanwhile, Sir Ed Davies described Boris Johnson's reappearance at a Conservative event last night as bizarre and a sign that the country, he says, is ready to move on. Well, the former Prime Minister made his first and only speech of the election campaign, claiming that a Labour government would mean higher taxes. A Conservative minister has conceded that Labour is likely to win a landslide majority. Mel Stride told GB News today that while he accepts polls pointing to a big win for Labour, only voters can decide the final outcome. His comments come after an editorial was published in The Telegraph today by former Home Secretary Suella Braverman, who says the Tories must prepare for the frustration of opposition. News to us from Hull in the last few hours that a third person has been arrested on suspicion of money laundering by detectives investigating a funeral home there. 35 bodies were recovered from sites belonging to Legacy Independent Funeral Directors earlier this year. The latest arrest is of a 54-year-old woman who's now being questioned by police. A man who's 46 and a 23-year-old woman were held in March and released on bail. In the US, President Biden has reportedly told a key ally that he's weighing up whether to remain as the Democratic nominee. According to a report in the New York Times, the president believes the next few days will be crucial to determining whether he'll remain in the race. The White House, though, is pushing back on those claims, with Joe Biden's deputy campaign manager saying those reports are absolutely false. And Hurricane Beryl is still swirling towards Jamaica after the powerful Category 4 storm flattened homes across several islands. At least 6 people were killed as the storm inflicted large-scale damage with winds of 145 miles an hour. It's now moving towards Jamaica, where it's expected to batter the shoreline with life-threatening winds and storm surges. Those are your latest headlines for now. I'm Sam Francis. More for you at 5 o'clock.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you, Sam. Now, if you want to get in touch with us here at GB News, simply go to gbnews.com/yoursay. We've had loads already. Very, very entertaining and insightful stuff. Get them in touch and I'll be read out a few before the end of the show. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's News Channel.
Hello, good afternoon. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update from the Met Office. Through the rest of the day, there'll be some further rain and drizzle, but it will turn clearer across the north and west. But then things do turn quite windy as we head into Thursday. That's because low pressure's up to the north of the UK, and you can see those tightly packed isobars. That indicates stronger winds. So it will turn quite breezy through this evening across the far northwest of Scotland and then elsewhere overnight and into Thursday. But it will turn clearer and brighter by tomorrow morning. So clear skies overnight for many of us once that rain does clear the far southeast. Temperatures will dip down a little lower than they have done lately, so a slightly fresher start to the day, but there's going to be more sunshine around for most of us to start the day on Thursday, but also those strong winds. We could see gale force winds up to the west of Scotland and also some very persistent, heavy, potentially thundery showers moving in across the Western Isles, the Highlands, down into southwestern areas of Scotland as well. Also risk of showers for Northern Ireland. Clearer and drier for much of the rest of the UK, for much of Wales, central areas of England, northeastern England as well, and much of southern areas as well. But there will be a bit of a breeze around through Thursday, and I think as we head into the afternoon, that wind will strengthen elsewhere away from the far northwest, where there will be quite frequent showers through much of the day. But actually, for most of us, it's going to be a sunnier and drier day as we head into Thursday. The best of the sunshine will be across southeastern areas. Temperatures climbing a little higher than today in the sheltered sunshine, 21 degrees at best, but very fresh feel further north and west in the low teens for some of us. Then through Thursday evening, we start to see this spell of wet weather spread in from the south and west, and that's going to become a much bigger feature as we head into Friday. So more widely a wetter day on Friday, and then we're into sunshine and showers as we head into the weekend before it warms up a little into the start of next week.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Jules Buckley, west of Glasgow, westbound M8 from junction 27 of Paisley through towards Glasgow Airport, junction 28. Now there's a breakdown there, so the carriageway is partially blocked and delays are starting to build. Heading towards Norfolk, the westbound side of the A143 is still shut. There's been a collision by the BP roundabout in Skull, so it's closed from Low Road through towards Stuston. Heathfield and East Sussex, the A267 still blocked between the garage and Hook Reed Lane. A multi-vehicle collision there is still being dealt with, so currently queuing 3 vehicles involved in that accident. Heading towards Anstey in West Sussex at the Bolney Road, the A272. That's closed at the moment both ways, no way through between Stairbridge Lane and Pickwell Lane and queuing, and that's at the scene of a collision. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Welcome back. Well, we can now cross live to Sir Ed Davey, who is at a campaign event in Hertfordshire. Got some live pictures on your screen. There he is in what looks like a Cindy mobile. He's in a pink Cadillac, maybe straight from the Elvis Museum, driving around. He's practically done everything. He's been on a water slide, he's been on a paddleboard, he's been on a donuts, getting towed around a harbour in Cornwall. He got his leg up on a bike. He's bungee jumped yesterday. Now he appears to be channeling his inner Ken in the Barbie mobile there, out and about. I still think There's time yet to fire Ed Davey off the white cliffs of Dover as a human cannonball, or perhaps to swoop in a pink tutu. There he is, in what looks like a Barbie-mobile, a 1950s pink Cadillac Elvis Presley would have been proud of, waving off the electorate. Hopefully, he'll be going into the sunset. You've got to say this for Ed Davey. He certainly put out a different type of campaign. One packed with eye-catching moments. Some people ridicule him for it, but, you know, he's got a sense of humour. And he's also been talking about serious issues like care, childcare and sewage, of course. And for a guy who's obsessed with sewage, he's certainly been plopping into the water a lot himself, looking for floating voters. Ed Davey on the campaign trail just 15 hours ago now till those polls open. So moving on, the former DUP leader, Sir Geoffrey Donaldson, has been sent for trial over allegations of historical sex offences. A district judge at Newry Magistrates Court said he was satisfied that the 61-year-old and his wife and co-accused, Lady Eleanor Donaldson, had a prima facie case to answer during a committal hearing earlier today. We've been crossed live now to get the latest with our GB News Northern Ireland reporter, Dougie Beattie. Dougie, bring us up to speed on this very concerning case.
Well, it is still a shock to almost everyone in Northern Ireland. This man that held such high office here, he was the leader of unionism, is now facing these charges. He arrived at Newry Court this morning separately from his wife Eleanor. She arrived about 10 minutes later. The 61-year-old stood alongside his wife in Court 3 in Newry Magistrates Court. And at the first time he had appeared here, there was 11 charges. There's now another 7 on to that, making 18 charges against him. They range from 1 of rape, 4 of gross indecency and 13 of sexual assault. His wife faces another charge, bringing hers to 5 of aiding and abetting. Now, this is really a preliminary hearing, going from the Magistrates Court to the Crown Courts. That will happen in and around the 10th of September, and he will be arraigned then, and we will expect that trial to actually take place in and around about February of the new year.
Thank you, Dougie Beattie, for that update there on the case of Geoffrey Donaldson from Northern Ireland. Dougie Beattie, thank you very much for joining us. Now, after turning away from the Labour Party in 2019 in favour of the Brexit-backing Conservatives, Red Wall voters are once again under the spotlight, ahead of polling stations opening tomorrow. But in this general election, will industrial heartlands of the Midlands, my part of the world, and the North return to their roots, or will they set up a new political course? With issues that date back decades, some in former coal mining communities like Ashfield, well, they feel that politics won't bring the change that's so desperately needed for them. And our East Midlands reporter, Will Hollis, has this story.
Living amongst the coalfields and steelworks, Red Wall communities had everything: employment, housing, purpose. The deep wound of industry's disappearance in the final decades of the 20th century is still healing. Simon, a leader at the local college, has worked in Sutton in Ashfield since the 90s.
In many areas of Ashfield, in many neighbourhoods, there are the obvious signs and indicators of poverty and disadvantage.
If England means as much to...
At a coffee morning run by the college, spirits are raised. The football is tying people together. Meanwhile, the election is testing the fabric of Britain's democracy. Here, crime and antisocial behaviour are priorities.
You do hear of it, people having bags snatched and things like that. So, yeah, I think policing's a big issue around this area.
Not far from the Downing Street here in Ashfield, some of the poorest parts of the Red Wall can be found. The problems here stretch past a term of Parliament.
The issues to do with unemployment, people adjusting to new ways of needing to learn and learn new skills for new employment, they've been around for a long time.
Ashfield is a single brick in the former Red Wall. In 2019, the switch from Labour to the Conservatives, influenced by Brexit, surprised the nation. The promise of levelling up has brought millions of pounds for local projects, but critics say it's not enough. Now, voter trends in the red wall are tricky to predict. The challenge that candidates in red wall constituencies face is whether they can convince voters that change is possible when the problems they face stretch between generations over decades. At a nearby food bank, volunteers and staff from the college help the desperate.
We've had one come in this morning who's actually just been released from custody.
Few people using the service think politics can change the life they're living, says Sandra.
They're quite disillusioned with politics. They're thinking that things are not going to change in the way that they need them to be.
Voters here have a hand in deciding the direction Britain takes next. But Parliament, the place where the future of the Red Wall rests, feels very far away. Will Hollis, GB News in Ashfield.
Now, Ashfield is a seat I know very well. My mother lives there. In fact, I stood as a candidate in the 2019 general election, and the candidates for the Ashfield constituency in this general election are as follows. Ria Keane is the Labour Party candidate, Debbie Solomon for the Conservative Party, Daniel Holmes for the Liberal Democrats, Lee Anderson for Reform UK, Alexander Coates, the Green Party, and Jason Zadrozny for the Ashfield Independents. Now, coming up, I'll be joined by a shadow minister about his feeling about the party's potential return to government, and is he happy that the Sun has backed them? I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News is Britain's election channel.
And when the big stories break, we're tackling them on Britain's newsroom. When we disagree, and we disagree a lot, it's even livelier than normal.
We don't disagree that much.
We do. His comedy, though, is revolting. I knew her, unlike you. That explains Beverly Turner's temperament.
It's a bit frosty in here, isn't it?
You'll have one of me one day.
For dartball practice. Britain's newsroom on GB News. Weekdays, 9:30 a.m.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Recent polling suggests dentistry has become the hardest NHS service for patients to access, within NHS treatments still 15% lower than pre-pandemic levels. So a YouGov survey reveals that more than 70% of Brits describe seeing the dentist as difficult, compared with 64% for GPs and 42% for A&E services. One British man, get this, he even took to flying 10,000 miles for dental care, saying the extra time and money spent was far less hassle than trying to get an appointment on the NHS. I mean, it's a sad state of affairs. And a shocking 1/5 of UK adults have also admitted to trying DIY dentistry, including the old trick of tying string around a wobbly tooth and slamming it in the door so it comes out. So, should people be more careful when taking their teeth into their own hands?
That is one of the problems. Obviously, population growth makes it much more difficult for people to access NHS services, but they need to then catch up on the other side with dental services and increase the amount of dentists and access to dentistry, and especially NHS dentistry, obviously.
What's the cut-off age for free dentistry on the NHS?
So it is 18 years old, but there are exemptions around maternity, pregnancy. There's some free care around pregnancy.
We saw some data a few weeks back about the number one cause for child admission into A&E is tooth decay. I mean, that was shocking when I read it.
It's really bad, and what happens is kids with multiple decayed teeth, they basically have to be put under general anaesthetic, and then all those rotted teeth have to be extracted under general anaesthetic. If those baby teeth start going crooked, then the adult teeth start going crooked as well. Right. So it is important to look after the baby teeth. It's really important. I think they should make it more central to their policies, definitely.
The People's Channel.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threat and so on.
As time passes, she could have said stump.
You made my argument for me.
My guests and I tackle the issues that really matter, with a sharp take on every story.
It went everywhere. Something practical could be done.
Or I can become something different.
Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. 4:48 now. Shadow Health Secretary Wes Streeting has welcomed the Sun newspaper's endorsement of the Labour Party. The paper says it's time for a change, which means that it is time for Labour. Now, the tabloid boasts a record of backing certain election winners. And let's now speak with GB News political correspondent Olivia Utley, who's been following Labour today. I beg your pardon. No, we are going instead to Shadow Minister without portfolio, Nick Thomas-Symonds, who joins me on the show. Nick, always a pleasure. We've spoken many times on this campaign trail. You've been beavering away, working your socks off, and now you've been rewarded, or have you, with the endorsement from the Sun. That might not go down too well with all Labour voters.
Well, firstly, Martin, it's good to join you as always, as I have during this campaign and indeed before. But I do welcome this, and it feels like a significant moment on the eve of poll. And it follows, of course, endorsements in recent days from the Sunday Times, from the Evening Standard, from The Economist. But it is really, really important to say today that to the readers of all those different publications that it is about now coming out to vote tomorrow. It really, really is. There is change here within our grasp, but we have to get people to come out and vote for it. And Martin, you mentioned the work that I and the entire party have been doing, and we will continue to fight for every vote right up to the close of poll tomorrow night.
There's a report out today talking about a £15 billion hidden tax bill. This came out from the Citigroup that voters will face if the Labour Party get in Nick Thomas-Symonds. A raid on pensions, a raid on property, a raid on inheritance tax, a raid on capital gains tax. The country is broke. The biscuit tin is empty. There's only one way to get the country moving again, and that is increased taxation under the Labour Party.
No, the way to get the country moving again is by growing the economy and having that plan that Labour does from stability, not going back to the economic instability that the Conservatives have caused from the 5 Prime Ministers, the 7 Chancellors of the Exchequer, the 9 Education Secretaries, where people up and down the country are still paying the cost of that economic chaos. We will also need to see investment. That's why we have a plan for a national wealth fund to invest in the jobs of the future, but also reform. We need, for example, to reform our planning system so that we can get Britain building again. So it's that plan for growth that is central to the agenda of the next Labour government, if we are privileged enough to form one. And where there are changes in tax, like, for example, closing the loopholes that are enjoyed by independent schools in order to spend that money on 6,500 teachers in our state sector. That is actually in the manifesto. That's why it is costed, so that people can see that laid open before them.
Now, Nick, the Sun are saying it's time for a new manager. Last night, the Conservatives wheeled out their old manager. Of course, I'm talking about Boris Johnson. He was talking about a sledgehammer majority would be the height of insanity. Don't let the Putinistas deliver the Corbynistas. What's your take on Boris Johnson's colourful intervention?
Well, it's pretty desperate from the Prime Minister, isn't it? I mean, the Prime Minister resigned from Boris Johnson's government. And I think really what the presence of the last leader but one on the campaign trail shows is really how desperate the Conservatives are. And it's a reminder too, by the way, of the extent to which standards in public life were trashed under the Conservatives, particularly thinking there, Martin, of the Partygate scandal, when people up and down the country were making sacrifices, not attending funerals, not going to see their relatives, when we know that those rules are not being followed in Downing Street or indeed number 11. Both this Prime Minister and indeed that previous Prime Minister both ended up with fixed penalty notices for their behaviour. So above all, I think the presence of that particular former Prime Minister on the campaign trail is a reminder, really, of something we shouldn't forget about the Conservatives, and that's their theme of governing in a way that is one rule for them and one rule for everybody else.
Can I quickly ask you, with £2.7 trillion in debt, if the Labour Party get in and nothing changes because the country's broke, who will you blame then? You can't carry on blaming the Conservatives.
Certainly not. And we, if we are privileged enough to form a government, will want to be judged on our record. But the big thing for us today is that change could happen this week. And my message is to go out and vote for it. Okay. Because the things that we've been talking about in this interview, about the things that we don't want to forget, from Partygate to the economic chaos, if the Conservatives got back in again, nothing would change.
OK, Nick Thomas, I'm afraid we're going to have to leave it there. Simply run out of time, but thanks for joining us on the show. Always a pleasure. Now, we've got YouGov coming after this, a huge poll out and an exclusive insight with our exclusive with Nigel Farage. I'm Martin Daubney on British News Channel. Short weather, Annie Shuttleworth.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, good afternoon. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update from the Met Office. Through the rest of the day, there'll be some further rain and drizzle, but it will turn clearer across the north and west. But then things do turn quite windy as we head into Thursday. That's because low pressure's up to the north of the UK, and you can see those tightly packed isobars. That indicates stronger winds. So it will turn quite breezy through this evening across the far northwest of Scotland and then elsewhere overnight and into Thursday. But it will turn clearer and brighter by tomorrow morning. So clear skies overnight for many of us once that rain does clear the far southeast. Temperatures will dip down a little lower than they have done lately, so a slightly fresher start to the day, but there's going to be more sunshine around for most of us to start the day on Thursday. But also those strong winds. We could see gale force winds up to the west of Scotland, and also some very persistent, heavy, potentially thundery showers moving in across the Western Isles, the Highlands, down into southwestern areas of Scotland as well. Also risk of showers for Northern Ireland. Clearer and drier for much of the rest of the UK, for much of Wales, central areas of England, northeastern England as well, and much of southern areas as well. But there will be a bit of a breeze around through Thursday, and I think as we head into the afternoon, that wind will strengthen elsewhere away from the far northwest, where there will be quite frequent showers through much of the day. But actually, for most of us, it's going to be a sunnier and drier day as we head into Thursday. The best of the sunshine will be across southeastern areas. Temperatures climbing a little higher than today in the sheltered sunshine, 21 degrees at best, but very fresh feel further north and west in the low teens for some of us. Then through Thursday evening, we start to see this spell of wet weather spread in from the south and west, and that's going to become a much bigger feature as we head into Friday. So more widely a wetter day on Friday, and then we're into sunshine and showers as we head into the weekend before it warms up a little into the start of next week.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good evening, I'm Johnny Ratner. In the outskirts of Birmingham, northwest of the city centre, Oxhill Road at Handsworth remains shut. Recovery works underway following a three-car collision. Norfolk, south of Skull, the A143 remains shut westbound, just off the A140 where a lorry's overturned. There are long anti-clockwise queues on the Surrey stretch of the M25, partly due to a breakdown midway between Godstone and the Clacker Lane services heading towards Kent, but not being helped by the ongoing roadworks on that stretch, of course. In North London, Wood Street to High Barnet's blocked by collision, as is Gravel Hill, and South London through New Addington, and Elizabeth Line trains are suspended out of Hayes and Harlington to Heathrow Terminal 4 and Terminal 5. District Line trains can't run on London Underground from Turnham Green to Richmond following a track fall to Gunnersbury, which also means London Overground services are also suspended from Richmond through to Southampton. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
£30,000 in tax-free cash really could be yours. It's our biggest cash prize of the year so far, and you could be getting that winning call from us to tell you that you're our next Great British Giveaway winner.
You're joking? Really? Seriously? It's not a wind up, is it?
I'm slipping neck. Oh dear.
Oh my god, this is amazing. I'm in shock. Like I said, I've never won anything like this.
That is absolutely fantastic.
We're over the moon. Thank you.
For a chance to win £30,000 in tax-free cash, text cash to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2. Or post your name and number to GB07 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 30th of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threats on.
As time passes, she could have said stump.
You made my argument for me.
My guest and I tackle the issues that really matter with a sharp take on every story.
Went everywhere.
Something practical could be done.
Or I can become something different.
Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry. Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
A very good afternoon to you and a very happy General Election Eve. It's 5 p.m. Welcome to the Martin Daubney Show on GB News. We're broadcasting live, of course, from the heart of Westminster, all across the UK. Now, the PM's cause hasn't been helped today by the Sun newspaper backing Sir Keir Starmer, saying he's earned the right to govern. Tomorrow's front page, as you can see on your screen, says it's time for a new manager, and we don't mean sack Gareth Southgate. I get reaction from a government minister shortly. Ukraine, is it too corrupt for NATO? Well, Ukraine has been declared too corrupt for the alliance in a major blow to President Zelensky, with $380 billion of Western money so far in aid and counting. Do we have a right to know where our money is going? And a very Merry Christmas from Sadiq Khan, because in yet another major U-turn, the London mayor has slapped the congestion charge on electric vehicles on Christmas Day. Is this the latest assault on the war on motorists, and is it a taste of what's to come under the green plans proposed by the Labour Party? That's all coming up in your next hour. This is the final countdown now, only hours away, 14 hours until the polling stations open. That's General Election Eve. We've got a cracking Nigel Farage exclusively here on 7 p.m. on GB News, but I've got a sneak preview in a few minutes' time. Nigel Farage, Reform leader, would reveal how many votes he expects to get. And a little later, I'll also be joined by the Director of Political Analytics at YouGov, because they released their final predictions today before the general election. It's the biggest, the most insightful poll. We'll have exclusive insight. What will it mean for the country? What will it mean for your area? Let us know. Will any of this change your mind, including the Sun newspaper backing Sir Keir Starmer? They backed everybody who's a shoo-in to win since Maggie Thatcher onwards. Does it make a blind bit of difference? Or have you got your own minds by watching intelligent news channels like GB News? Get in touch, gbnews.com/your say. But before this final action-packed hour, it's your headlines. Sam Francis.
Martin, thank you very much, and good evening to you. It's 5 o'clock, and as we heard there at the top of the programme, the nation's biggest-selling newspaper is now backing Labour at tomorrow's election. That's the first time since 2005. The Sun's made the announcement with an editorial you can see here on your screens that declares it's time for a change of manager. Well, it comes as a new projection puts Labour on course for a landslide general election win, with the final YouGov poll just out, putting them on 431 seats. Rishi Sunak insists, though, the race isn't over, and Sir Keir Starmer says a big Labour majority would give him the mandate he needs to repair what he's called broken Britain.
We are fighting for every vote,
and across the country there will be constituencies which will go down to the wire, and therefore we will continue to fight until 10 o'clock tomorrow night, making the case that change only happens if you vote for it. But it is a huge opportunity for our country. This is the opportunity to turn the page and to move forward. And I want people to go out and vote for change and be part of the change that I think will bring about such a different and better future for our country.
Boris Johnson returned to the campaign trail last night with a warning that Labour winning would mean that electing Britain's most left-wing government since the Second World War. In his first and final appearance on the election campaign, the former Prime Minister said putting Sir Keir Starmer in number 10 would mean higher taxes. And elsewhere on the campaign trail today, the Liberal Democrats have been telling voters the election is a chance to build a caring nation. The party says they've struck a balance between fun and serious in their campaigning and insists its message on health, social care and cleaning up Britain's water is resonating with voters. Reflecting, though, on Boris Johnson's appearance last night, Ed Davies said it's time to move on.
It's bizarre that the Conservatives are reminding people of the failures. I think people want to move on from Boris Johnson and Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak and all the damage they've done to our country. And they want to know what you're going to do in the future, how you're going to change our country, particularly how you're going to sort out NHS and care. And that's what Liberal Democrats are talking about. We want to make sure we build a caring nation where the importance of social care and family carers is really at the front, so we can both give them the support they need, but also transform our NHS at the same time by investing in care.
Well, away from the election here in the UK to the US election, President Biden has reportedly told a key ally that he is now weighing up whether to remain as the Democratic nominee. According to a report in the New York Times, the president believes the next few days will be crucial to determining whether he'll remain in the race. The White House, though, is pushing back, saying that claim is absolutely false. It comes after the US news website Puck reported a leaked poll which shows the president's support has started to fall in key states. It also found that Vice President Kamala Harris would perform better in a hypothetical match against rival Donald Trump. The daughter of Captain Sir Tom Moore has been disqualified from being the trustee of a charity. The charity's commission blocked Hannah Ingram Moore and her husband Colin from taking on charitable roles after looking into the Captain Tom Foundation shortly after his death in 2021. It came amid concerns about the charity's management and independence from Captain Tom's family. In Australia, police are resuming their search for a 12-year-old child who was reportedly attacked by a crocodile whilst swimming. The alert was raised last night in Kuala Lumpur, a remote town near Darwin in the Northern Territory. Police said the child was last seen swimming in Mango Creek with a group of others before they noticed the child had vanished. The area is home to around 100,000 saltwater crocodiles, which is more than anywhere else in the world, though attacks on people are rare. Hurricane Beryl is still swirling towards Jamaica after the powerful Category 4 storm flattened homes across several islands. At least 6 people are now known to have died as the storm inflicted large-scale damage with winds of 145 miles an hour. The ferocious storm comes unusually early in this year's hurricane season, and scientists say the rapid pace of its approach is partly due to climate change. As I said, it's now moving towards Jamaica, where it's expected to batter the shoreline with life-threatening winds and storm surges. And in some royal news for you, the King and Queen are in Scotland for their annual Holyrood Week. His Majesty joined Queen Camilla at a service in Edinburgh earlier, celebrating the Order of the Thistle at St Giles's Cathedral. The Prince of Wales and the Duke of Edinburgh, were also in attendance for an extra special service as the Scottish capital celebrates 900 years. Those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Sam Francis, back with you at 5:30.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you, Sam. Well, on election eve, the final YouGov poll has just dropped on us, and it shows that Labour are on course for an historic election victory. And the results from this poll are as follows. The Labour Party will be 431 seats, and that's a 229-seat gain from the 2019 election. The Conservatives on 102 seats, down 263. Liberal Democrats 72. That's a fantastic result for them if that bears through. The SNP on 18. Reform UK on 3 seats, according to YouGov. Plaid Cymru on 3, and the Green Party gaining just 1 on 2. So that's the latest poll just in. To quickly recap, that would be an historic results for the Labour Party on 431 seats, the Conservatives on 102, Lib Dems on 72 in third place. And we've heard today that the Sun is also backing Sir Keir Starmer. Let's get some reaction from a former Labour MP. Dennis McShane joins me now in the studio. So, Dennis, let's go to this poll first. Just dropped, you and I going through the results in the break. A massive gain for the Labour Party, a huge swing from 2029. No doubt a result that Sir Keir Starmer, if this bears through, will be very, very happy with.
Absolutely delighted. It's a complete vindication of his policy of recentering the Labour Party, which is where it always should be. It was under Tony Blair, and we won nearly that result back in 1997. I'm already thinking about 2020... What is it now? 29. Can we hang on? But it's extraordinary. And frankly, we've seen the Brexitized Tory party. Let's be very clear. The last 8 years, from David Cameron through Theresa May, through Boris Johnson, through Liz Truss, through Rishi Sunak, the party has dived into that Brexit rabbit hole and come up with 100 seats.
Many people watching this will be saying that's the opposite of what's happened. The Conservative Party has become obsessed with open borders, with high taxation, with wokery, and that actually is a position similar to the Labour Party. Perhaps that's the point. But let's look at some of these numbers in more detail, Dennis. The Conservatives on 102 seats
got
here.
Three figures, so they should be happy with that.
And isn't that a funny place to talk about, though, Dennis? Because some of these polls were existential in their wipeout, down to 53, 54 seats, 62 seats, some of those polls. The Telegraph poll being the low water mark. Weirdly, they're probably quite happy with 102 seats.
Yes, it was 70 only a few days ago, Martin. You're quite right. But it's that volatility and these extreme swings we're seeing in many of the democracies right now. We're in a very funny period. I can give you a long lecture about it. We haven't got time. We're in a very funny period in politics. So Labour should bank it, but should be very careful not to think that's it for the next 10 or 15 years. It could go as fast as it's come.
And also, Dennis, if this comes through, Liberal Democrats on 72 seats, that's a net gain of 61 seats. If this bears through, that's an astonishing performance from the Liberal Democrats. A lot of pratfalls, a lot of pranks, a lot of tomfoolery on the campaign trail, but some serious issues too around sewage, around caring. If this bears through, it'd be a fantastic result for Liberal Democrats.
Well, you have to say chapeau to Davey. Maybe Rishi Sunak had done a bit more paddling and bungee jumping and parachuting. It really was great publicity. But again, they will have, look at him there. I mean, that's great on television now, but in a week's time or whenever Parliament comes back, what's he actually going to have to say? He's not the official opposition. That would have been the breakthrough. He'll just be sitting there alongside whoever the Tories choose as leader, an acting leader, I assume, by next week, and waiting for his turn in Parliament.
Meanwhile, north of the border, Dennis, the SNP, according to this YouGov poll that's just landed, down to just 18 seats. That's a net loss of 30. The bottom has fallen out of the SNP.
And a big win for Great Britain. I mean, the SNP had a lot to say and a lot to offer, but again, they obsess with nationalism, national identity, like the Tories, Brexit. They didn't see the wider picture, the broader interests of all the Scottish people. I speak of somebody born in Scotland, Scottish family. OK, I'm brought up in London. I'm a Londoner, really. And Scotland now is so much stronger as it's becoming again part of this great United Kingdom of ours.
Dennis, let's talk about Reform UK. The YouGov poll here has them on course for just 3 seats. Some others have had them on as many as 18 seats, 15 seats. Again, a lot of volatility in the Reform UK polling. Nigel Farage might claim that's because they haven't been name-checked. They are coming under others. So maybe this poll is coming in shy. But you've been saying quite a while now, you think they would underperform compared to some of those high numbers?
Yes. I mean, everybody loves Nigel when he was in the European Parliament, cheeking the European President of the European Commission, the President of Europe, sort of shouting at Europe. He only went there about once a month to claim his pay and expenses, as did many others. I'm not making any point. He didn't do any work there. They loved
Quite
him.
a few MEPs didn't do any work there. Trust me, I was one of them.
Oh, God, sorry, Martin, you're a witness. But the moment Nigel came back and tried to become an MP, they said, Nigel, what, running our laws, our taxes, our children's future, our education, our policing, our healthcare? No. You go back and play games in Strasbourg, and I think he's got, he's a huge celebrity. That's a big celeb vote. I'm very curious who the second, just going on this poll, 2 Reform MPs, who the second Reform MP might be.
Well, those names are up for grabs. I mentioned them. I'll have to read candidates out, so I'm not going to do that. But thank you very much for joining us. Dennis McShane, quite a bombshell poll there. Let's see how that bears out. Only a matter of hours now to go until those polling stations open. Dennis McShane, thank you very much for joining us. Always a delight. Now, moving on, Sir Ed Davey is making the most of the final day of campaigning after a stunt-filled few weeks. Earlier, he vowed to knock down the blue wall while doing circuits of a field, of course, in a JCB tractor in Wiltshire. Just a short while ago, he took a ride in a pink Mustang. And it's good news for him because his party, as we just said, could gain 61 more seats tomorrow. And let's cross live now to GB News' Mark White, who has been following the Liberal Democrats today. An astonishing scene there. We've seen practically every mode of transport known to man, from paddleboards to bungee hooks to a pink Barbie mobile. The only thing left now, Mark, surely, is a human cannonball off the White Cliffs of Dover. Tell us more.
Well, I have to say I was expecting the human cannonball or perhaps even skydiving today, because he's been giving us so much, hasn't he, over recent weeks with his bungee jumping and his paddle boarding, his the roller coaster rides, and of course also down onto the water itself. Now, as far as the Liberal Democrats are concerned, they'll certainly be very buoyed to hear these predictions of as many seat gains that would take them into that third position, overtaking the SNP. And indeed, Ed Davey, when he was out today speaking to a number of different rallies, he said that, he was taking nothing for granted, but the feedback they were getting from voters in the home counties and also in the West Country, as well as rural Scotland and rural Wales, was very positive indeed. So they do believe that they are on course for returning a significant number of MPs. But when he was asked about it earlier, of course, he was giving quite on cue this "they are not taking anything for granted" line. This is what he said.
Well, we're not complacent. We want to make sure we work through to 10 p.m. tomorrow to make sure we earn the votes. But across the home counties in former Tory heartlands, what I'd call the Blue Wall, in the West Country, across rural Britain, in rural Wales, rural Scotland, rural England, we're finding so many former Conservatives switching to us. I hope that Liberal voices can be heard much more strongly. As the fourth party, we've not been able to have so many parliamentary questions, particularly Prime Minister's questions, or get so much media coverage.
And we have that 1959 pink Cadillac right here on cue for you, thanks to Ellie Stretch Limmers in Essex. They've agreed to hold it back for us. I'm in negotiations with them, Martin, because you've been doing such a sterling job for us in the afternoons. We think we can lay this on as a routine for you to be driven to your afternoon presenting role. I'll just have to try and clear it with the boss. I'm sure that will go well.
Well, Mark White, I've always been an Elvis Presley fan. That's about as near as I get to looking like the king. But talking about being a kingmaker, back to these results, Mark White, an astonishing set. If it comes through, Mark, an astonishing set of numbers. 72 seats would be a net gain of 61 for the Liberal Democrats, and they must... It really makes you ask questions about which campaign has worked. It's been a campaign full of negativity, full of Project Fear, full of bad news from the Labour Party and from the Conservative Party. Ed Davey's been having a bit of horseplay, seems to have worked well.
Yeah, they are completely unapologetic for that. They knew they were always up against it in terms of trying to grab the headlines with this election campaign as not the third party, but of course the fourth party in Westminster at the moment. So as far as Ed Davey was concerned, it was all about trying to come up with some headline-grabbing stunts that would attract the media, and they did just that, and they ensured that he was on the nightly news every single night. But the serious side of it was, because he was doing those stunts, he was still able to put his message across, like today, of course, the very important message, as the Liberal Democrats see it, of trying to invest another £9 billion of emergency aid into the health and care sector. So he's still able to get his message across, but of course showing a fun side as well. That might put some people off, but the gamble from Ed Davey's point of view is that it will bring many others actually to the Liberal Democrat cause, that will show that you know, they've got a bit of a sense of humour, a bit of a personality, and they're maybe worth taking a punt on.
Superb stuff, Mark White. I love that car. I might take up on that offer, although maybe for Liberal Democrats might be a bit concerned about the carbon footprint. Mark White, thank you very much for joining us. Always an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much. Now, moving on, it's time now for our Great British Giveaway, and it's an absolute whopper. Your chance to win a massive £30,000 in cash, tax-free. It's our biggest prize to date, and here's how you could win the lot.
It's our summer treat to you. Your chance to win an incredible £30,000 in tax-free cash. Our biggest cash prize of the year so far. With an extra £30,000 in your bank account this year, you could take the ultimate financial holiday and send some of those day-to-day financial stresses packing. £30,000 could get you those nagging home improvements done, buy that brand new car, or just enable you to kick back and relax for the rest of the year. For a chance to win £30,000 in tax-free cash, text cash to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2, or post your name and number to GB07 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 30th of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Now, coming up in a massive blow for Volodymyr Zelensky, NATO will say that Ukraine is too corrupt to join the alliance and request additional steps from Kyiv before membership talks can even progress. I'll be speaking to a military expert shortly. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Jubes and Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect, and then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
Prince Harry, he's been opening up about the death of his mother, Princess Diana, while speaking to the founder of armed forces charity, Scotty's Little Soldiers.
Well, the Duke of Sussex joined 50 children who were being supported by the charity and urged youngsters to open up about their grief, saying if you suppress it forever, it will eat you away inside.
Well, let's speak to our royal correspondent, Cameron Walker, who joins us in the studio. Cameron, Prince Harry has spoken quite a lot about grief and bereavement from his mother's passing and the trauma he had. Did he say anything new that we haven't heard before?
And the difference here was, instead of kind of talking about himself, which clearly we've heard a lot of in the last 3 years from Prince Harry with his memoir Spare and the Netflix series, I could go on, he was putting the spotlight back on the charity and on Nicky and her story. So it was almost like having the old Prince Harry back, and also thinking about like what could have been if he didn't step back as a working member of the royal family.
That's so fascinating. In many ways, he was sort of stepping into his old role in this. It was sort of performing a duty that he would have done back before the days of Megxit.
It is kind of like before the days of Megxit. He's been heavily involved in the charity for a good decade now, but when he came back for the Invictus Games celebration commemorations of the 10 years of Invictus last month, he spent time with 50 or so children, and he talks about how first instinct of a child when they lose a parent in awful circumstances such as that is, I have to be really sad for the rest of my life. And he talks about how those children who've lost parents through conflict feel like that, and how actually it's okay to be happy again later on in life when you've had the support, and realising that the parent you've lost would want you to be happy later on. So that's the message Prince Harry was trying to get across here.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry, Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
Now, don't miss our big interview with the Reform UK leader Nigel Farage. He'll speak to our political editor Chris Hope in our Vote 2024, the Leaders Special. That's exclusively from 7 p.m. this evening here on GB News. And indeed, to look ahead to this event, I'm now joined by that man, Chris Hope, our political editor, in our studio in Westminster. Chris, welcome to the studio. I know you've been out on the road with Nigel Farage, getting that exclusive in the bag. It's the final day, it's the final countdown, just 14 hours to go. Tell me, how did the event go?
So we interviewed him in a pub with a pint of beer, as you might expect. It goes out at 7 p.m. tonight for the interview with Farage. We've interviewed now all the four main party leaders over the past 10 days, starting with Keir Starmer, then Ed Davey, and then, of course, Rishi Sunak, and now Nigel Farage. We pushed him all sorts of things. He made some surprising remarks in support of David Lammy, hoping he can get into touch with Donald Trump, which I find quite interesting. I think Lammy may not want the support of Nigel Farage in that connection, but there we have it. And he was very interesting, I think, about the future of his party. Now, I've been looking back at my cuttings of dealing with Nigel Farage. I've been covering him in a previous life, The Telegraph, since 2010. In 2015, he got 3.9 million votes and a single MP. I wondered whether it might be similar this time. And he gave some quite interesting forecasts. Here's what he had to say.
Back at some of the stuff we've written about you in the past, 2015, 1 MP, 3.9 million votes. We're going to repeat ourselves, aren't we, again? A few MPs and millions of votes, and then you'll be...
OK, first things first, we will get much, much more than 4 million votes.
How many MPs will you get?
Many, I've no idea.
How many votes?
I'm hoping it'll be well above 5 million, and I think it could. I think 6 million is very possible. Very, very possible. Will that
That's 1 in 5 of the electorate.
That's what I believe will happen, yes. Will this get to... Will the seats we win be proportional? Probably not. And then Labour might get 37% of the vote and have the biggest parliamentary majority in history. And by this time next week...
Helped by you.
By this time... No.
Helped by you going back to the beginning.
No, the Tories have done themselves in. By this time next week, the campaign for electoral reform will be in full cry.
Okay.
I know, because I'm going to be part of it.
There you have Nigel Farage, 6 million people...
Yeah.
One in 5 of us to vote Reform UK, 1 in 5 of us Brits to vote for his party. That's a big call. He knows that if you get towards 7 million, 6 or 7 million, you start getting into dozens of MPs territory. He won't say how many MPs he's got, and clearly it's vital for him. He gets back and is returned as an MP at the 8th time of trying, although many of the earlier times were in no-hope seats. This is probably his second proper go at it, compared to 2015 and 2024. But yeah, I think he's looks like he's getting the bit between his teeth, and he will be in full cry, as seems likely. They will get probably millions of votes, according to the polls at least, and not enough MPs to justify those numbers.
Interesting, 6 million votes, the prediction. That's 50% more than UKIP trousered in 2015. That returned a single MP. The YouGov poll that's just dropped at the top of this hour, Chris Hope, this has Reform UK down for 3 seats. Other polls have had them as high as 18. Very, very volatile. Nigel Farage has complained a lot, of course, because Reform isn't being name-checked on some of the polls. It's coming under the others.
That changed in the past 3 weeks. He complained to the polling council, and they now do strip out Reform UK from the others. So that should have changed in recent weeks. But no question, he's looking at that thinking it's a huge range. I think 18 it feels toppy to me. I can't think of any party who's gone from 0 to 18 so quickly. 3 is about ballpark, maybe. It could be any number, though. And his worry is he doesn't know where anyone lives. He hasn't got the data of the legacy party, so he's basically trying to just the force of his personality, the force of his campaign. He's big on TikTok. The young people like him, 16, 17-year-olds. He's Reform ranking second ahead of all the other parties behind Labour. He's just got to work out how can he make sure that enough people get that noise and volume and vote for him. Maybe if you get 6 million votes, you should get more than 1 MP. Put it that way.
35% of 16, 17-year-old lads liking what Reform are offering. On to the second point of electoral reform. We hear about it all the time. We heard the same in France yesterday. Those who aren't in power always want to change the way you get into power. And when they get into power, they're OK with it.
The issue of electoral reform, proportional representation, was very interesting an issue in 2021 Labour conference. When there's lots of talk about them about a 3-term Boris Johnson-led Tory government. And oddly, all the talk fell away as Labour streaked ahead in the polls after Partygate and the rest. And I just wonder, and the COVID inquiry, COVID fallout, I just wonder whether if a party like Labour win a majority of 229, as the YouGov MRP poll finds tonight, whether Labour may just quietly push it to one side. They're very happy with how the system works. Thank you very much.
I suspect, Chris, they'll say, let's reform it from within. let's leave it as is, as they always do. But on a more broad point, 7 p.m. tonight, that goes out. You've been following Nigel Farage all these years. In terms of, I always ask you, when you sit down with them, with Mr Sunak, with Mr Starmer, with Mr Davey, you're there, you're having a pint, you're eye to eye. How did he seem?
He seemed relaxed. In fact, they all have seemed relaxed. I think Sunak seemed a bit desperate to make his points. That was the morning after the interview, the debates he did last week, the head-to-head debate. Ed Davey was a bit strange. He'd just been trying to breathe life into a dummy before I spoke to him. It felt a bit Ed Davey-like at that time. Nigel, I thought Keir Starmer was very relaxed a Friday night over a pint. He was genuinely smiling off to the Taylor Swift concert that night. And today with Nigel Farage, he did seem relaxed. He seemed, a lot of these leaders, they're often tanned and healthy, a lot of walking around, campaigning. He's been going everywhere trying to lead both a local and national campaign at the same time. It's a month to the day, by the way, since he shocked Westminster and energised the election campaign with this decision. So I think there's no regrets. His biggest problem, I think, his two big moans are Ofcom rules, which mean that the mainstream broadcasters like GBNews can't give him a lot of coverage. We give him the same amount of coverage compared to what he got in the last election in the Brexit Party.
Them's the rules.
Them's the rules, and he's moaning about them, which is fair enough. He's really cheesed off, I think, about the candidates. And that always annoyed him in UKIP days, 2014, and the various dossiers would appear with the background of some of these candidates, and he feels he can't manage everyone's lives, but he's being made to. But that's the deal. He's leader, so he might moan about it, and that's why he says he's going to professionalise the party, make it a membership organisation after Friday. But more of that at 7 p.m.
And yet, even this poll, 3 seats. Before, a lot of them had it on 0 seats. So if this comes true, it seems Nigel Farage maybe return 8th time lucky. Chris Hope, 7 p.m. That's going out exclusively live on GB News. Chris Hope sits down with Nigel Farage. Thank you very much. Great work as ever, Chris Hope. Now, there's lots more still to come between now and 6 o'clock. And yet another massive U-turn. London Mayor Sadiq Khan has now slapped the congestion charge on electric vehicles from Christmas Day. Merry Christmas from Mayor Khan. But first, it's your headlines with Sam Francis.
Very good evening to you. It's just after 5 o'clock. The top story from the newsroom. Well, with just hours until polls open in the morning, a new projection puts Labour on course for a landslide general election win. That final YouGov campaign poll puts them on 431 seats. It would mean a majority of 212 in the House of Commons, predicting the Conservatives will drop down to 102 MPs. YouGov also puts the Liberal Democrats on 74 seats, the SNP fall from 48 to 20, Reform on 3 and the Greens securing 2 seats. Meanwhile, the nation's biggest selling newspaper has backed Labour at tomorrow's election. That's the first time since 2005. The Sun made the announcement with an editorial declaring that it's time for a change of manager. It comes as Rishi Sunak insists he is still fighting hard for votes in the final few hours, while Sir Keir Starmer's warning the race isn't over yet. A third person has been arrested on suspicion of money laundering by detectives investigating a funeral home in Hull. 35 bodies were recovered from sites belonging to legacy independent funeral directors earlier this year. The latest arrest is of a 54-year-old woman who's now being questioned by police. A man who's 46 and a 23-year-old woman were held in March and released on bail. In the US, President Biden has reportedly told a key ally that he is weighing up whether to remain as the Democratic nominee. According to a report in the New York Times, the president believes the next few days will be crucial to determining whether he will remain in the race. The White House, though, is pushing back on those claims, with a spokesperson for Joe Biden saying they're absolutely false. And Hurricane Beryl is continuing to swirl towards Jamaica after the powerful Category 4 storm flattened homes across several islands. At least 6 people were killed as the storm inflicted large-scale damage with winds of 145 miles an hour. It's now, as I say, moving towards Jamaica, where it's expected to batter the shoreline with life-threatening winds and a storm surge. Those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Sam Francis. I'll be back at 6 o'clock for a full roundup. Next, though, a look at the markets.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Well, here's your last look at today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2763 and €1.1818. The price of gold tonight is £1,849.88 per ounce. And the FTSE 100 has closed the day at 8,172 points.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Thank you, Sam. Now, if you want to get in touch with us here at GB News, simply go to gbnews.com/your say. I'll read out the best of your messages a little later in the show. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hello, good afternoon. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update from the Met Office. Through the rest of the day, there'll be some further rain and drizzle, but it will turn clearer across the north and west. But then things do turn quite windy as we head into Thursday. That's because low pressure's up to the north of the UK, and you can see those tightly packed isobars. That indicates stronger winds. So it will turn quite breezy through this evening across the far northwest of Scotland and then elsewhere overnight and into Thursday. But it will turn clearer and brighter by tomorrow morning. So clear skies overnight for many of us once that rain does clear the far southeast. Temperatures will dip down a little lower than they have done lately, so a slightly fresher start to the day, but there's going to be more sunshine around for most of us to start the day on Thursday. But also those strong winds. We could see gale force winds up to the west of Scotland and also some very persistent, heavy, potentially thundery showers moving in across the Western Isles, the Highlands, down into southwestern areas of Scotland as well. Also risk of with showers for Northern Ireland. Clear and drier for much of the rest of the UK, for much of Wales, central areas of England, northeastern England as well, and much of southern areas as well. But there will be a bit of a breeze around through Thursday, and I think as we head into the afternoon, that wind will strengthen elsewhere away from the far northwest, where there will be quite frequent showers through much of the day. But actually, for most of us, it's going to be a sunnier and drier day as we head into Thursday. The best of the sunshine will be across southeastern areas. Temperatures climbing a little higher than today in the sheltered sunshine, 21 degrees at best, but very fresh feel further north and west in the low teens for some of us. Then through Thursday evening, we start to see this spell of wet weather spread in from the south and west, and that's going to become a much bigger feature as we head into Friday. So more widely a wetter day on Friday, and then we're into sunshine and showers as we head into the weekend before it warms up a little into the start of next week.
The latest GB News travel.
Good evening, I'm Johnny Ratner. Major problems up in Perth and Kinross to the west of Cooper Angus. The A984, the old military road, is closed through Meeklew for emergency water main repair works. And in Norfolk, south of Skull, the A143 is shut westbound just off the A140 where a lorry is overturned. North London, Wood Street at High Barnet, blocked by a serious collision. And in South London, Gravel Hill, the A212 shut through New Addington following an accident. In East Sussex, the A267 at Heathfield, that remains closed for recovery work following a free-car collision. Investigation works also taking place. There are long anti-clockwise queues on the M25 out of Kent into Essex after an earlier accident through the Dartford Tunnel. And on London Underground, severe delays on the District Line, Turnham Green to Richmond following a track fault at Gunnersbury. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Welcome back now. Ukraine will be told it is currently too corrupt to join NATO in a major blow to Volodymyr Zelensky. The position will be set out in writing in the NATO letter to be signed at the alliance's annual summit on July the 9th. And the alliance will request additional steps from Kyiv before membership talks progress, according to senior officials in the US State Department. To discuss this, I'm now joined by Lieutenant Colonel Stuart Crawford, former British Army officer and defence analyst. Always a pleasure to have you on the show, Stuart. Should we be surprised about this? It's long been known that Ukraine suffers from a corruption problem. Transparency International has them placed 104th out of 180 in the world's nations, languishing in the third most corrupt tranche of nations on earth. And it's always been the case, has it not, that if you don't fulfil the criteria for corruption, then you should not be allowed access into NATO?
Good afternoon, Martin, and thank you for inviting me on again to talk about such matters. I don't think we should be surprised, to be perfectly honest. The Soviet Union, which dissolved in 1989 or around about there, was a byword for corruption because, given the low conditions of earnings and so on and so forth, corruption was seen by many as the only way to get ahead. And it was done through the usual cronyism, nepotism, tax evasion, siphoning off of public funds and so on and so forth. Now, it's only been 30 years, really, since Ukraine became an independent nation. And it's perhaps not surprising that elements of this corruption type establishment still exist. I know that Zelensky has done a lot to try and eliminate large parts of it, including dismissing a large number of defense ministers, because obviously with the money going into defense, the opportunities for corruption are manifold. But obviously the United States in particular has decided that it hasn't done enough. And so its accession to NATO will not be brought forward until it's sorted out.
And it's a fair question at this point, then, is it not, to raise the matter of if Ukraine is riddled with so much corruption, that's the position of NATO, that's the position of Joe Biden. That's not a controversial position. It's simply a statement of fact. If Western nations have donated over $380 billion since the conflict began in January 2022, do you think people, taxpayers, the public, have a right to ask, where's our money gone?
Oh, absolutely. And I think it's a fair enough question. And you could ask it of many administrations and governments around the world who are in receipt of benevolence from other countries. It's not only 5 years ago, Croatia, which is a member of NATO and has been since 2009, was said in some sources to be the most corrupt nation in Eastern Europe. So we shouldn't be surprised that this sort of thing goes on. But the point, I think, the important point to make here, Martin, is that Ukraine can't really join NATO at the moment anyway, because it's at war with Russia. And if it were to join NATO today or tomorrow, then through Article 5 of the North Atlantic Treaty, that would bring the whole of NATO, all the nations of NATO, into the war against Russia. So it just can't be done at the moment until the war is resolved.
OK, thank you very much for joining us. Always a pleasure. Lieutenant Colonel Stuart Crawford, thank you very much for joining us. Now moving on, because thousands of drivers could be forced to pay an expensive daily charge when a major rule changes come in this year, impacting London's congestion charge scheme. The Transport for London website states that only battery, electric or hydrogen fuel cell vehicles are eligible for the cleaner vehicle discount. However, that discount is being discontinued from, wait for it, Christmas Day 2025. Is this another step up in Sadiq Khan's never-ending war on motorists? Well, joining me now to discuss this is the motoring journalist and the broadcaster Danny Kelly. Danny, always a pleasure to have you on the show. Merry Christmas, Mr. Khan. He's changed the rules once again, this time electric vehicles to be slapped with a congestion charge.
That's right, a turkey bone stuck in the throat of potentially 100,000 electric vehicle owners in the capital itself, Martin. For those who've been driving diesel or petrol over the last, say, 5 years since 2019 when it was introduced, there was often confusion as to why electric vehicles were allowed to drive in the highly congested areas of London. Bearing in mind, this isn't about emissions, it's about congestion, why they were allowed to drive scot-free. So critics of Sadiq Khan are saying that back in 2019, he was showing his green credentials, knowing that there weren't, relatively speaking, hardly any electric vehicles that were going to benefit from the £15 discount of electric cars. And now they'll say that, once again, critics of Sadiq Khan will say, yeah, well, this is a vindication. It's all about money with Mayor Khan, because now there are 100,000 electric vehicles potentially driving around, dodging the £15 fine. And where's the green credentials gone? So it makes no sense, or it makes little sense to any motorist, whether it's an electric vehicle or indeed a diesel or a petrol engine car, because bearing in mind it's about congestion. I go back to my earlier point, you know, these electric vehicles tend to be big old lumps, and that add to the congestion over the years, and why they should drive without paying the 15 nick, Martin, is often a puzzle for a lot of people.
Indeed, and here's another puzzle, Danny Kelly, and it's this. This is an ever-changing, movable feast, the taxation on motorists. 1 minute you're enticed to buy a car because, hey, you're getting a tax break. The next, it changes. Danny, I want to put it to you. Is this a taste of what we might expect to see rolling out across the country? We've seen in Wales, ran by the Labour Party, 20-mile-an-hour limits came in, and Angela Rayner said ULEZ schemes could be coming to every town near Britain. Could we be seeing a ramped-up war on motorists?
Without a shadow of a doubt, Martin, and people should be cautious about what the credentials are. What's motivating this potential Labour-run government? Is it all about keeping the air we breathe clean, or is it really just about trying to get as much dough as possible out of motorists? People will have their own opinion. But let me tell you, besides being a motoring journalist, Martin, I'm also a used car dealer, and people are having to hemorrhage thousands of pounds on perfectly serviceable diesel cars up to the age of and including 2015 because they are not ULEZ compliant. It's scaring the hell out of motorists, not just in London where there is the charge, or Bristol, or indeed Birmingham in the Midlands. If indeed it comes to towns like Coventry or Wolverhampton, which are close to me, it's going to affect the working man and woman. They're going to have to get rid of that car for thousands of pounds, less than it really is worth. And people will make their own mind up. But it's something that is just generating so much cash, Martin, and the working man and woman are going to suffer.
Danny Kelly, you always come on GB News fully revved up, my friend. It's always a pleasure to have you. Take very care of yourself. All the best, mate. Now, still to come, we'll look at the final YouGov poll, which shows that Labour is on course for an historic election victory. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Jubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
The Royal Academy's annual exhibition has returned for the 256th time to brighten the summer holidays. It's the world's oldest open submission exhibition. Anyone can enter work to be considered for inclusion. I'm joined now by art critic J.J. Charlesworth for his verdict. What is your verdict?
My verdict is you should go and see it. You are confronted with many things of varying quality, selected by artists, and you very much, instead of being given something to you that's supposed to be good, you have to make your own decision.
I went along yesterday, and I personally did see some pictures on the wall that I thought were absolutely stunning. I'm going to mention Peter Ucker, which I think is a remark. And now these are the two by Ben Johnson, Grundtvig 1, and we've got one coming out of Berlin Pool. I think that's an absolutely stunning piece of work. And then Claire Douglas should be up. Here we are, Claire Douglas.
Yes.
Souvenir from the Anthropocene.
Yeah.
That last one, actually, a very witty painting.
A piece like that was really interesting. I think it caught a lot of people's eyes because it had very kind of humorous, slightly bleak take on post-Brexit Britain. It's set in this fictitious world of Brummington, which is a sort of loose satire on Birmingham. I thought it was a bit mean.
I think we had maybe Black Lives Matter. We had Boris Johnson. I think our own Jacob Rees-Mogg made his way into the painting.
Yeah, so there's definitely a slant, a political slant, on the part of the artist. But even that said, I thought it was an interesting and enjoyable work, even though maybe you don't agree with the artist on what they're trying to say. And I think that actually made for an interesting moment because you're seeing that people are disagreeing, right? Both through the artwork and in front of artworks.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry, Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
Welcome back, 10 to 6. Now back to the massive polling news that's just dropped in this final hour of the show. And YouGov's final poll before the election shows that Labour are on course for an historic election victory. And I'm now joined in the studio by a Director of Political Analysis at YouGov, Patrick English. Patrick, thank you so much for coming in. So a lot of polls are giving us very different takes, but one common thread has been a big majority for the Labour Party, big trouble for the Conservative Party. Talk us through your methodology. How reliable is your poll? How big was the sample size?
Thanks for having me on. Delighted to come here and talk about the research out today. Well, the first thing to emphasise is, of course, that all of these polls are subject to error, and there are intervals that we talk about. We have our central projections, which, as you've been discussing, 431 seats for Labour, 102 for the Conservatives and 72 for the Liberal Democrats. But inside the ranges, the intervals that we think could very well happen tomorrow, there are all kinds of interesting and fascinating stories. Perhaps we're looking at a 1997-style election for Labour, or it could be an even bigger majority than our central forecast. There's even a scenario where the Liberal Democrats win more seats than the Conservatives and Ed Davey becomes leader of the opposition. So they're always subject to a bit of error. However, I would say these are MRP polls. We spoke to 48,000 people. We've spoken to 150,000 people over the course of the campaign to do our 3 MRP polls. So there's big sample size, big statistical methods, and in 2017 we successfully used this to correctly anticipate that Theresa May would lose her majority in that election. So we're fairly confident in what we're saying, but we would also like to express the ranges of what's going on.
And Patrick, the Conservatives on 102 seats, actually, a lot of Conservatives might be quite happy with that. When you consider some of the polls, the Telegraph poll that we covered on GB News had them down at 54 seats. Liberal Democrats on 72, putting on 61 seats. That would be an astonishing result for them. Can I also ask you about Reform UK? A lot of volatility around their performance, some as high as 18 or even greater. Some polls saying no seats at all. You have them down at 3 seats. You talk there about the bigger picture of the electoral volatility, the unpredictability. How unpredictable is this election compared to others? And therefore, do you think these margins could swing quite considerably?
I do think they can, yes. This is an election of huge seismic change. We're looking at an opposition party going from their worst defeat since 1935 within one electoral cycle to potentially having the biggest ever parliamentary majority. That is a huge amount of change, and it's really difficult for us as pollsters to really get a grasp on exactly how big that change is going to be and how it's going to fall out at the seat level, which is why I think you see such differences between different pollsters and indeed talking about those ranges again. With Reform UK, we have them at 3, but our upper bound for them is in the teens. So that's us saying we wouldn't be surprised if there was a double-digit number of Reform UK MPs after tomorrow's vote. We don't think that's the most likely outcome, but it could be. And there are lots of voters out there who are still undecided, even now, on the eve of the election, and many of them whose pledges are soft. So they're telling us, I think I'm going to vote Labour, but I could still change my mind. So there is still a lot to play for. There's a lot of uncertainty, but this is what we think is going to happen tomorrow.
Superb. And the Green Party here on 2. That would be disappointing for them, only putting on 1. The SNP hemorrhaging seats, you predict here, 18 seats, losing 30. Very, very volatile set of affairs. So you still think this could change quite wildly?
Certainly, if you look at our intervals, there are all kinds of different stories of how this, we think, plausibly this election could go. Labour could be under 400 seats. They could be above 450. The Conservatives could be below 100. They could be up toward 150. There's really so much at play here. There are 89 seats that we currently project. There's one party who's just 5 percentage points ahead of the other. So really what we're saying there is it's a toss-up. Those could go either way, and there's a lot that's still there out to play for, we think.
And very, very quickly, got about 10 seconds. What about voter turnout? Are we expecting that to be suppressed this time?
Expectations are it's going to be a bit lower than usual, yes, but of course we'll have to wait and see.
Superb stuff. What a lot to dig our teeth into on the final hour of this show. Those polls open. Thank you very much. That's the Director of Political Analysis at YouGov, Patrick English. Pleasure to have your company in the studio on this general election eve. Well, it's all to play for. The polls open at 7 a.m. and that's it from me today. But not to worry, because up next it's Jubes and Co. But tomorrow you can join me, actually. I've got an early bird start. I'm also doing breakfast 6 till 7 tomorrow, and I'll also be back doing my show. 15-hour day, no sleep for the wicked. First, here's your weather now, and it's Annie Shuttleworth.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, good afternoon. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update from the Met Office. Through the rest of the day, there'll be some further rain and drizzle, but it will turn clearer across the north and west. But then things do turn quite windy as we head into Thursday. That's because low pressure's up to the north of the UK.